All right, my apologies for being a little late here. A couple administrative things we had to take care of upstairs. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'd like us all to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could, I'd like to take advantage of our guests, our local Boy Scouts, and ask them to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, first item up is Wednesday's pet. Is Sherry here?
It didn't say her.
Okay, we will, with the board's permission, pass on that one and come back to that when Sherry and a pet perchance arrive.
Okay.
All right. Next up, the minutes. To consider and act upon the minutes of regular meeting January 21st, 2015. Okay to take these together?
Sure.
Yes.
And special meeting January 28th, 2015. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion or comments? All right, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Takes the minutes. Next up, some special recognition for Boy Scout Troop 90 for completing their citizenship in the Community Merit Badge. First of all, you're all here. Congratulations. Thank you for coming. Congratulations on that. Would the troop leader like to take us through?
Actually, we have it's one of the scouts who's going to
Fantastic.
be our first presenter.
All right. Please.
Mr. Selectmen, honored guests, friends, and family of Troop 90, I am Andrew Hiltz, a Life Scout from Troop 90. While we were in the Citizenship and the Community Merit Badge, we talked about how important it is to be involved and participate in community activities. Mrs. O'Gorman helped us think about the different ways we could be involved in our town and help other people. To become more involved in our town, Mrs. O'Gorman helped us to organize a number of community activities as well over the last few months. These included a toy drive during the holidays, a drive to gather laundry detergent to help families, a visit to the senior center to interact with people who don't get out very often, a complete rehaul of the senior center library, such as reshelving books, setting up a card catalog system with large print, washing windows, cleaning all of the activity rooms, setting up the dining hall, escorting seniors in the dark parking lot, and interactive discussion, as well as an effort to clear fire hydrants in our neighborhoods during the heavy snows. We enjoyed getting the opportunity to learn more about our own community, as well as different ways to help people in our own town. Thank you again for recognizing Troop 90 in this group of Scouts.
Fantastic.
If I might.
Please, please.
My name is Drew Hiltz, and I'm the Troop 90 Advancement Chair. On behalf of Tom Black, our Scoutmaster, Brian McLaughlin, our Committee Chair, we'd like to say thank you very much to yourself and to the town of Fairfield for recognizing the Scouts. A little background on Troop 90. We're chartered out of Greenfield Hill Congregational Church. That's the reason for the dogwood emblem on the back of our neckerchiefs.
Very good.
Very proud of that. We were established in 1938. Since 1953, we produced over 80 Eagle Scouts out of Troop 90 alone, which is incredible. We've had since 2007, on average, about 4 Scouts, and in 2013 we had 5 Eagle Scouts. And we're on the way, as you can see, to producing quite a few more. We have a long-standing tradition of community service, as you know, helping disabled war veterans in the Memorial Day Parade, assisting in the volunteering at water stations during town marathons, and helping out just in general in the volunteer activities at the senior centers and food drives and things like that. In addition to that, you probably realize we do a number of projects that are community-based for our Eagle Advancement as part of the Boy Scout Advancement opportunities. And in those opportunities, we do a lot of things like building bridges at the Audubon Society. So if you've ever been to the Audubon, you've probably walked across the bridge or been on a path that we've helped to clear and maintain. And we're very proud of that. Those activities all fostered around supporting the community, making sure that we do whatever we can to help our friends and our neighbors. And that's part of the opportunities and the awareness that the kids received as part of the citizenship and the community merit badge that Mrs. O'Gorman helped to conduct over the last few months. It's fantastic that you're recognizing us. We appreciate it and hope that you'll look to us to fulfill any further service obligations if something should arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've had a chance to attend a few of your Eagle Scout ceremonies over the past few years. I'm very impressed with the Eagle Scouts themselves and what they accomplish. And if you've heard my comments, it's two things. It's not only that you're doing the demanding task of being an Eagle Scout, but I'm very impressed with all the other activities that Eagle Scouts accomplish. Their grades are up, they're tops in sports, they're in leadership position in the school. And I think that's a tremendous learning opportunity, but also a tremendous way to give back to the town at this age. And you truly set an example for all of us in doing that. Also, the troop leaders, you've got 80 Eagle Scouts. That didn't all happen at once. You guys have established a tradition of excellence for scouting and for the town of Fairfield. So thank you
We have a
on
good
that.
support network, including the community and the families. The families really make a great deal of difference to us.
Any comments from the board?
I'd just like to say congratulations, wonderful work. I mentioned before we started the meeting that I have 2 Boy Scouts in Troop 82, and I see the tremendous value that they get out of it, but also that they give value back to the community. And I'd like to echo the first Selectman's comments that it really takes a village. You know, when we teach our kids, they learn through doing. They learn through volunteering, community service, and I've been so impressed not only with the kids in this troop and other troops in town, but also with, again, that commitment from the troop leaders, which is so important for these kids. So congratulations. It's a great job.
Congratulations, guys. You are a very impressive group of young men. You are you are leaders in our town today, and you're the future leaders of our town and other towns. We're very proud of you. We thank you for all your hard work, all your efforts, and all the work you do to make our community better for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Now, we do have a proclamation for each of you that details everything you've done to get here. If I could ask my colleagues to help me present these.
Absolutely. With honor.
Let's see. And what we'll do is ask each of you to come up one at a time and present these as we call your name. Here's a familiar name, Ethan Dabrowski. There he is.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Ethan.
Thank you.
Andrew Hills. There we are. And Andrew, very good job. Ethan, come on up, stay up here if you could. Andrew also, very good job with the mic there.
Thank you.
That's
Very
one of the
nice,
hardest skills to
very
know.
nice.
Most people
Yeah,
are
public
more afraid of
speaking,
public
very
speaking.
Yeah.
Very good.
And
There you go.
as well.
Excellent, excellent. Kieran Johnson. Oh, I think these folks are going to
Thank you.
Congratulations, Jim.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Jacob Auerbach. Absent. Okay.
I'll take that one for him. Thank you very much.
Patrick Galusha. Here he is. Andrew Martin. Congratulations. Nick Horsey. Andrew Corsi. Sorry, who's older? Matthew Haverly. Aiden Hamburg. I think we're short one. We've got Zachary Corsi.
He's here in support of the entire troop.
Very good. You fooled me. So. All right. Why don't we gather on here? Why don't we guys get a
right in
picture.
front. There you go.
Wow. Thank you. for standing outside.
Look at that, huh? You're squeezing her, guys.
Yeah.
There you go.
Drew, get one in there. There you go.
Oh, yes. Here, come on. Sorry. Get over here. There you go.
All right, great. Guys, thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, when we get to it, that's the rescinding motion, and the bond resolution we passed is there.
That's the one we passed behind there, right?
Sheila?
Yes.
This is the motion to rescind. This is the correct bond
Okay.
resolution.
Gotcha.
All right.
Okay, so
Okay.
we're not there yet, but when we get there.
Okay. That never gets old, recognizing good people that do wonderful things.
Oh, yeah. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
The,
it's good stuff.
no, the troop up there does a great job, and I'm really impressed with the volunteers that year after year
Oh, yeah, the parents.
devote their time
Oh, yeah.
to keeping that going. It's just great for our town.
Absolutely.
All right, next up, vacancies. This is for information only from the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. Joan Neely, Republican, from 1400 Umpqua Road. Joan passed away this past January. Item 7, for resignations from the Harbor Management Commission. Benjamin Baker, unaffiliated, 174 Old South Road, resigned effective 1/22. And we want to thank Mr. Baker for his time and volunteerism on the Harbor Management Commission. That's one of the more, I guess, been very much in the spotlight these past few years between the Exide and Mill River cleanup, as well as some mooring issues we had during this past winter. And the Conservation Commission doesn't always get in the spotlight, or the Harbor Management Commission doesn't always get in the spotlight, but has been doing a very good job in terms of keeping us on track in both those occurrences. Next up, appointments. For the Affordable Housing Commission, Robert L. Frigo, unaffiliated, 39 Campbell Road, for a term of 11/11 through 11/15. He's filling a vacancy for Saul Bricks, who resigned. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
You've got Mr. Frigo's information packet. Mr. Frigo's here if anybody had any questions for him specifically.
No, just thank you for volunteering to serve our town, and we greatly appreciate your background and your efforts and desire to serve. Thank you.
I second that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any comments from the public? Back to the board. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. And just to follow up, Mr. Frigo, I've gotten to know him from his work on the Library Board of Trustees. He was chair of that board. We worked together time there, and I'm thrilled that he's stepping up to help the town out in another capacity. Would you care to offer any words?
Well,
If you do, you need to come up to the podium.
well, I think I'm very concerned about senior housing and the options and keeping seniors staying in Fairfield as opposed to going elsewhere, because I really think it's important to keep them. And affordable housing is a key issue. A lot of problems with state regulations and stuff, but I think I can make a contribution, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate. Deborah.
No, Bob, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, item 9, from the planning director, to hear an update on the beach area and Storm Sandy recovery. Jim? Just kind of quoting. I asked Mr. Wendt to come before us today just to give us an update on how things are going on in the beach area. Jim's been very directly involved in, obviously, a lot of the rebuilding that's going on, as well as a lot of the hazard mitigation grants that are coming through, and I just wanted everybody to have an update on that.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Wendt. I'm your Assistant Planning Director. If you have walked, driven, biked around the shore area in the last year or so, you will have observed there's a tremendous amount of activity ongoing down there. Just snapshot view post-Sandy, in the 2 years and a couple of months since Sandy, there have been 100 demolitions and reconstructions in the shore area alone, and 50 lifts. So 50 homes have already been lifted. In 100, a 2-to-1 difference, new construction, 100 demo and reconstructions just in the flood area, with now more resilient, flood-resistant, flood-compliant structures. There's been a countless number of other permits issued for repair or other damage that did not amount to substantial improvements, but in October of 2013, we applied for hazard mitigation grants on behalf of 68 homeowners to assist in their home elevations. These are grants that are not damage repair grants, they're grants to prevent future damage. The reimbursement grants, so the homeowners first have to do the work. They have to pay for it out of pocket, and then they're eligible for reimbursement thereafter. The majority of those are reimbursed at a 75% level. Some of them, the later ones, are capped at a maximum of $100,000 reimbursement. Those 68 grants total $13.6 million worth of estimated construction costs, with $9.3 million worth of eligible reimbursements to the homeowners, should everybody do the work. To date, out of those 68 applications, we've received 44 back so far, all approved. The remainder of those are still in the pipeline. The homeowners have either a 3-year or a 2-year performance period under that grant, depending on which pool of money they're in. And we have issued 1 permit to date for a grant recipient to lift. So of those 68, it's been a year plus getting word back from FEMA. They told us it's going to take a while. It's just these things move slowly. So over the next 2 or 3 years, we're still going to see a tremendous amount of activity down here in terms of folks elevating and making themselves more flood resistant for the future. That's all I have, Mike, unless you guys have any questions.
Any questions?
I do have a question, somewhat related. Do you know what the turnover effect on people selling their homes or their properties has been in this area? I mean, are these the original owners we're talking about, or do you have any sense of how many people sold and then?
Just from the permit activity, the 50 lifts versus the 100 new constructions, I think the vast majority of those lifts were existing homeowners that stayed in their house. Mm-hmm. My sense of the new construction is the majority of those were new owners. That the incumbent owner sold, builder demolished and built, new owners now in the picture. I don't think that's 100%. I know of at least one instance where a homeowner demolished his house and built a new house and moved back in the same property. So I don't have hard numbers, but just my sense is the majority of that 100 are likely new owners.
So I'm wondering if many of those people were older, they chose to leave Fairfield.
I think the sad side effect of this storm is that the improvements that were required, in many cases, did push people to make the decision to sell and leave. I think I don't have a hard number for how many that is, but there's certainly that element, a fair number of folks that chose to take that option, and perhaps not their first option, unfortunately.
I think there are a couple components of that drive that. One is that some folks that bought down there and didn't have a mortgage did not have flood insurance. So when this hit, they didn't have that buffer of
means,
money to come and
sure.
help.
Sure.
Second, and specifically to your point, if you were seniors, there was a time, and I know because my dad was a teacher, there are a lot of teachers that he worked with that lived down there, and they lived in a cape, they lived in a ranch, it's a flat neighborhood,
Sure.
it's great for seniors, great for walking. Well, one of the problems with Storm Sandy is it changed the character of the neighborhood. It basically raised every home 12 steps. So now if you're a senior and want to bring a bag of groceries into your house, you've got to go up 12 steps, then come back down for the next bag of groceries. So it made it a lot less senior-friendly
That's
than
right.
before. So even if you had the money,
Sure.
and even if you could afford to raise your house, it may not be your first choice. I know my parents moved out of their house away from the beach area, but at some point where the steps got to be too much. So they reached a certain point in life where they had to get to single-floor living or one-level living. And the beach area is just not compatible with one-level living any further.
No, I think that's a great point. I am also curious in terms of the value of the houses, you know, the huge change that must have taken place down there in terms of you go from a ranch to you go to a whole new rebuild of a much more expensive home down there in terms, so it is going to change the population in that respect as well.
Without question.
Yeah.
And what's surprising to me, I thought post-storm we'd see some downward pressure in the price points for new construction, and it's almost been the opposite.
Right.
You'll see in
You
the
can see it.
real estate ads now, FEMA compliant, so
Sure.
there's some added premium value
Cachet, yeah.
to that, because the folks that were here, the homes that were built more recently suffered much less damage. I mean, the rules work. The folks that were later, newer construction pre-storm had very little damage, and so the folks that were damaged, now there was an incentive for them to be in that position. But the new construction prices are rather startling, and so yes, it is. It's, I mean, good news, bad news.
Sure, it's
Values are
changing the face
increasing.
of that area, yeah.
Bad news is some folks can't afford that.
Thank you.
Well, it's the other drive, and Jim, you and I talked about this about a while back, was that you have Storm Sandy coming in, you have damage, you have somewhat of an incentive to raise your house to avoid the next storm.
Of course, yeah.
But then the flood insurance rules changed.
Yeah.
And with the new flood insurance premiums, even though legislation's passed and it's delayed the implementation for a few years, everybody got a glimpse of what the new flood premiums would be for flood insurance. And that if you were not FEMA compliant, there was a dramatic increase of what your bill would be. So in essence, you were economically forced into raising your house.
Yeah, that's calmed down a little bit with legislation, but that's still kind of looming out there. I think the bigger driver now is the more new construction there is, or the more lifts there are, the folks that are remaining at that lower level, it just creates more pressure for those homes to become elevated, just to be competitive in the marketplace.
Good. Any comments?
Yeah, Jim, thanks for being here with the update. I think you mentioned that there were 68 applications and 44 had gone through.
44, yes, we've received responses back for 44 so far.
So there's 24 still out there?
Correct.
What is the general reason, or if there is any general reason, for the ones that haven't gone through the pipeline yet?
I think it's just a matter of time. It's
Okay.
my understanding, we're one of many communities that have made these types of applications, and
Right.
there's a very limited number of folks at FEMA in Boston. There are 2 people in the state of Connecticut that are reviewing these.
Okay.
Ultimately, when they get forwarded, there's one guy up in Boston that's got all this on his desk.
He
So
does.
it's taken some time for this to get
Okay.
metered out. And that's not all bad. I mean,
Right.
easy for me to say, of course, I'm not one of the people that haven't heard back yet.
Right.
But there's a 3-year or 2-year performance window, and if some of those approvals are spread out, that spreads out that time frame over which these folks are going to be competing for contractors and house lifters.
Right.
So there is, from a selfish perspective, spacing that out is good from my perspective, but if you're that homeowner still waiting to hear, I can understand why that's frustrating.
But the 44 that have come back, they've all been yes, is what I
Yes.
heard you say. So that's
Right.
good news. And there's 24 or so out there that are just more a function of timing versus there being issues.
Correct.
Which would have led to my next question.
Yep.
If there are issues, is there anything else that the town could do or should be doing for them, or is just a matter of the cycling through?
There have been, since October of 13, if there were issues they've reached out for us for requests for additional information,
Right.
but I'm getting, or I should say, I received a tremendous amount of guidance from the folks at the state that put us in we had a very informative public meeting way back when, before the applications rolled out. The folks that attended that paid attention to what they heard, responded accordingly, and because of that, our applications were very well positioned to be reviewed favorably.
Good.
So I don't anticipate that any of those are going to be necessarily denied. It's just a matter of time to get them through the pipeline.
Okay, well, good, well, thank you for all that effort, and I know everyone appreciates it very much.
Yeah, just a couple things to point out. One, as Jim was saying, there are really 3 steps in terms of getting the application in. The town actually had to work with each applicant to fill it out, so that was, at one point,
Yeah,
almost
technically, the
70, but-
town is the applicant. The individual homeowners are not the applicant.
Okay.
We've made the application on their
On their behalf, right.
So it then went to the state, was reviewed by them, and that's where, there really weren't many that came back, so I remember we had a few
There
things to do.
we had some minor bounce back on issues that we need to clarify, but nothing catastrophic, because, you know, again, we had very good guidance from the folks at the state, and, you know, and we've got a pretty, as you well know, a fairly sophisticated citizenry here that pays attention and follow directions well, so that's what put them in good stead.
And then they went to FEMA. So they were all turned into the state between late October and early November a year ago. They went to the state, and then they went to FEMA. So the last year plus has been spent waiting for the review. All right? The other thing I'd like to point out is when we talk about the town reviewing these, the town working with the folks, please substitute Jim Wendt for those words.
Yes.
It's a lot of work.
Jim did a phenomenal job in addition to his regular duties in terms of getting these through. And as Jim mentioned, this is a different type of funding mechanism. So one, it's reimbursable, right? So the people have to go do the work. Second, the money is coming from the state to the town. So the town actually is the grantee in this case. So we actually have to then sign a contract
Responsibility, yeah.
with each homeowner to have them commit to the rules that we have to play by. So we've had the town attorney involved in terms of drawing up that agreement. We've looked at other communities in terms of what they drew up. And at one point in time, we had, when we had our 70 or 68 get turned in, we were like almost ahead of everybody by getting them in by the date at that time.
Yes, that's fair to say. I don't want to, well, I guess it's so I didn't want to say anything then.
It's
'cause
just
I
us and
didn't
the
want
TV family.
Of that 75% reimbursement pool, we have probably 2/3 of the pool of money that was allocated, so our folks did well.
Very well.
Right. And that means also that you know, Jim and our group did more work on that from the town standpoint than most other towns, because we just had more applications going through. So I did want, and then it also means that when they come back, because it's a town-state agreement, there's going to be certain management or ongoing monitoring efforts, and Jim has signed up to help out with those also.
You signed up?
In for a
You
penny, in
really
for a
did.
pound,
You
right?
came forward.
You're in. Jim, the town.
So that, just wanted to let everybody know kind of the amount of work that's been going on.
Absolutely,
And
thank
kind
you.
of behind the scenes, if you will, to a certain degree. If
Sure.
you're not one of those 68 people, you didn't appreciate how much work has been going on the site. So
Thank you.
Jim, officially, thank you
Thank you very
for
much.
all of that. I think that's it. Any other highlights on that?
I'm good.
All right, any further questions?
Nope.
Jim, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, an item on non-recurring capital.
All right.
To act, and I just handed out a packet, the 2 forms.
Yep.
You've got yours?
Yep.
You've got yours?
Yes,
All right.
the 3
Did
pages.
anybody want one in the audience get one? All right. This is a
Yes.
kind of a 2-part,
Is this an extra? No.
not anymore. Jen's was extra.
I'm calling.
And the first part is a proposal to act to rescind a bond resolution adopted at the January 28th meeting. And the bond resolution is attached to the point that I handed out. But to keep it simple, it's a resolution appropriating $5 million to $236,300, no, sorry, oh, it's not. It's, sorry, it's a resolution to rescind, let me start again.
Go ahead.
We've got a two-part motion here. One would be a motion to rescind the bond we passed at our last meeting, if we choose to rescind that.
Correct.
There is attached a revised bond resolution that we can talk to. Of course, we don't have to talk about that if we don't do the rescission, don't rescind it to start with. So, before us then, to act to rescind a bond resolution adopted on January 28th, and let me read it. Resolved that the resolution appropriating $4,854,342 for 9 non-recurring expenditures and authorizing bonds to finance such appropriation, adopted by the Board of Selectmen on January 28th.
28.
This says
it
21st, 2015.
But we voted on the
is
28th.
Is hereby rescinded. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Would someone like to make a motion to amend the date?
Make a motion to amend the date to January 28th.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the amendment and amendment only? Any comments from the public on the amendment and the amendment only? Back to the board. Are we ready to vote on the amendment?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the motion as amended stands before us. We were all here for the discussion. This is going to take that non-recurring just off the table.
Correct.
And then we will, as the second step, consider another one. Any discussion on this item to rescind?
Yeah, sure.
Go.
Short and simple for me. It's my understanding that from my perspective, the reason for rescinding this and potentially considering another bonding resolution is for us to have the opportunity to reconsider the 2 boilers of, I think it's $382,000 at Jennings School. I think that's the correct number?
Correct.
382?
Yep.
And that being the case, I certainly support rescinding the original bonding resolution as amended, and I certainly support the item itself for the 2 boilers as I did previously, and would support an amended resolution that reflects that addition.
Okay, very good. Any comments?
I would like to ask Mr. Cullen, perhaps, I don't
Well,
know.
right now, we're just talking about the motion to rescind.
Okay.
Does it relate to that motion?
No, no comments.
Okay. And I've got some comments, but I'm going to wait till we get on the motion itself.
Okay.
So, any further comments from the board? Any comments from the public on the motion to rescind and the motion to rescind only? Thank you. Back to the board. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next item
Part B.
is to hear, consider, and act upon a bond resolution appropriating funds for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation. All right, that bond resolution is attached to the handout I gave you, not the one in your packet.
Correct.
So may I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
All right, the motion is before us. Any comments? Sheila, did you want to ask that question?
I was just going to ask about the boilers again. Perhaps Mr. Cullen could answer them. And I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this further. I know that the 2 boilers in question had failed this winter just prior to our discussion, and that they had been fixed. And I'm just curious if perhaps moving forward, when we are presented with a non-recurring capital request for something like a boiler, if we could get more information on the maintenance costs for whatever's failing, if it isn't, or being replaced, the costs related to replacement parts or manpower hours in terms of, distracting staff from one thing to do another thing, et cetera, just so that we have some perspective on what's the history on this boiler or boilers with failure or any other item before us. Because for me, it's hard to have you know, we can say the boiler is 50 years old. I know there are other boilers that are 50 years old perhaps in town, maybe not Board of Ed boilers, none.
Actually, 25% of the town boilers, I believe, are over 50 years old.
The town boilers is what I was referring to. So it would be so helpful to get perspective in terms of where are these boilers versus other boilers, or how much money are we spending, or time and effort on these boilers, so that we can say this is truly you know, a high priority item. I need that perspective to make an informed decision, and I think it would be very helpful.
Sure. Yeah, actually, if I could make that a formal request, but change it a little bit with your permission.
Sure.
Because one of the questions is, you know, these boilers, I think, are technically 49 years old, not to split hairs, but the issue is there's nothing magic about 50. So my first question would be, what's the maintenance on years 40 through 50? So that's the analysis I'd like to have, because my question is, why did this come up this year? Why didn't it come up? Because we had lower non-recurring requests for the last 2 years. So the question would have been, why didn't we do it sooner if our maintenance costs are up that high in this case? So that's, I guess, I'm kind of, is 50 the right number? Should we be doing it 40?
Yeah, we started boiler replacements in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
What we did is we looked at our preventive maintenance program, and in our Board of Ed budget, we have about $35,000 for boiler PM. So that's just for a company to come out regularly 4 times a year, check all the boilers, check the inside of them, tune them up, fire them, make sure they're going to run. But we started with boilers in the school district that were from the 50s, 51, 54, and we worked our way up, and we just spread it out. The fact that we have 17 schools, we looked at what schools were going to be renovated or have additions, might have boiler upgrades, but we looked at a replacement plan to slowly take care of boilers at the schools, just like we do with roofs. You know, we can't come in and enter 17 schools' boilers all in 1 year. But we do have a work order program, computerized work order program, that tracks all the no heat boiler problem calls every year.
So what we're requesting is easy for you to do that. Mm-hmm. See, part of my issue with this is, one is that when it was first presented to this board, as you said, we're progressively, slowly through these. We allocate so much money per year for maintenance. Those issues weren't raised up. Slowly, the difference between 49 and 50 didn't seem to be that big an issue at the time, and I don't remember much being raised along that. Sitting on the Board of Finance presentation, what I heard was they could break at any point. If they did, we'd have to spend months getting new ones. We'd have to reallocate costs to move busing students all over the district. And that created a real sense of concern in my mind. That just wasn't the presentation we got. Second, the other thing I've gotten is emails from parents who are telling me that the school doesn't have heat, their kids have to wear coats and stuff in school,
Yeah.
that it's impacting the learning and the curriculum. That presentation wasn't given to this board. So my question is, what's going on at the school, and are kids really wearing coats every day, and how bad is it?
There are times that, you know, things break. We have, I think, an excellent program to research and stay on top of all the schools. If we don't have, to give you an example, if we have a school building that has no reservations on a weekend, so the building's going to be literally shut down, there's not even a custodian there, we still hire a security company to go in, open the building, walk the school, check the boiler room, check windows and doors, sign a report, and leave both days. So we're constantly looking at all of the schools to make sure we don't come in on a Monday morning and we have no power, no heat. But we do run into a case where a boiler goes down, a hot water system tank just broke this week at Riverfield, we had no hot water for a day. Those things kind of happen, so there might be an occasion where there's a day part of a school building gets cold and kids put their coats on, but not that often.
My concern, based on the emails we got, is the comments from the parents. The learning ability of their kids is being impacted. So I guess my question, along the lines of Ms. Marmion, is how many days this past year were the boilers not working at capacity?
Jennings, I can think of 2. There's work orders on 2. The incident with the starters happened on a Sunday with a church group that was at the school, and the custodian noticed and made the calls. That went into a Monday morning. We were lucky enough that those 2 starters were on the shelf. We were able to purchase those, and our own in-house technicians were able to replace those, get the boilers up and firing.
Okay, is 2 extraordinary, or is that kind of normal for most boilers?
Well, we generally, our rule of thumb is indoor air quality and school issues, school building issues need to be perfect so that the children's attention aren't out the window, a blind that's shaking and broken, or a noise in a mechanical system is taking their attention away from the teacher.
Yeah.
So certainly we want the school buildings to be as perfect as can be.
And certainly going forward, we are officially asking for all this information to be included. Is there some reason it wasn't included with the initial presentation
Well, I
so we
think-
could get that full picture?
I guess we can do that. We try and follow the 14-question format that the town has put together, which kind of asks a lot of the questions. And that's usually the format. We've done the photographs to show you some of the things that we're seeing when we get down into the boiler room, if there's a leak or a stain or broken material. We could certainly do more to provide you more paperwork. We seem to think we do put together an awful lot of paperwork and send things out.
Yeah. My concern is when something is impacting the program and the delivery of education to our students. I think that would be something to kind of emphasize to this board, because it certainly, for me, was a surprise to hear some of that stuff at the Board of Finance meeting. It sounded like they're in much worse shape than what was presented to this board for a decision, and obviously all these are tough decisions, so.
They are. Roof leaks are another issue, you know, so we think we do a pretty good job staying on top of them. Our facility plan has been in place for a long time now, and we are trying to get to every school building and get everything updated.
Okay. Any further comments from the board?
No, just quickly, thanks for coming back, and thank you for the additional information and update here and at the Board of Finance. And I think what I'm hearing is maybe there's some type of summary version of that annual maintenance report that you can download and share, in addition to a request from time to time to provide some, more data points and background. So thank you for that.
Yep,
And it might
appreciate
even be not just, if I may.
Sure.
Not just on the, for example, Jennings boilers, but give us perspective about, is this unusual versus the other boilers out there? So that we can make that informed decision, because that's what I struggle with. I don't know, is this extreme, not extreme, crisis waiting to happen, or is it just, business as usual?
Pretty similar to what you would experience at your home, except, our school buildings are pretty heavily occupied. So with 17 buildings, any morning we come in, there's issues with hot water, heating, roof leak. I mean, we are running. I mean, our guys come into the maintenance shop, and first thing they all do, 18 of them, where am I going? What happened?
And see, that makes sense to me, given the size of the operation, given the number of buildings, number of connections, if you will, number of plumbing fixtures, et cetera. Again, what I heard at the Board of Finance meeting, and what I'm hearing back from the parents, is that these boilers are not functioning. They're kind of on their last legs. And so my question is, looking at year 40 through 50, if we get to 50 and it's now or never, it's got to be this year, it's kind of an 11th hour thing again, where it's, what I'm looking for is something that says, no, the costs start going up, so we're looking for something closer to 45 perhaps, which might be a more reasonable number, so we don't risk the tremendous amount of cost that was pointed out at the Board of Finance meeting, that students would have to be bused to other schools, that it would disrupt them for potentially months out of the year, that would cause family issues, student issues, certainly hurt the quality of education being delivered. And what hit me is like, why are we waiting to 50 years and risking that type of component if it's really that eminent? If it's not that eminent, then so I guess I want to make sure that this board is making the right decision based on the same set of facts and same presentation that's given to each board. And I guess I'm feeling a little shortchanged in terms of not hearing the full scoop in terms of the concern that was expressed to the Board of Finance.
I also would tell you that it's not always the oldest boilers that we have the trouble with. We've had a lot of trouble with the 2 high school boilers. Fortunately, they each have 3 boilers each. They're in the 1971 range, but wards, we've had a lot of trouble and replaced them. In 2010 and 2012, we've done 2 of them. So there's only 1 old one left. Ludlow High School, we had 1 go, and we have another one now we're repairing to the tune of about $6,000, some tubes leaking, but...
Right. So in those cases, you're not waiting to 50.
Right.
You're actually replacing them earlier.
Well, on an emergency basis, we are. So they're not in the budget. They're coming out of
Okay, so in those did we have,
unexpected accounts.
when we shut those down, how did we deal with the students in that case? Did we have to
Well,
bus those?
they have three.
Yeah.
So the high schools are very large. They can run on a normal temperature day, one boiler, a second one when it starts to get cold, and the third one's really for cycling in and out. So we've been lucky enough that when one goes down, we can get it worked on immediately, replaced if have to be. And we still have two good running large boilers. Elementary schools have two boilers only. So you've got one for normal temperature days and the second one for when it does start to get very cold. You don't have a spare sitting there waiting. So,
Go ahead.
Quick question, Tom, and I think you touched on this about the weekend activity to keep an eye on things. Like, for instance, this weekend, we're heading into a 4-day weekend, right? And I'm assuming it's going to be quite cold most of those days. So what do you guys do over the course of those 4 days to make sure that when you come back on Tuesday, things are good?
yep, one of the things we do is, I'm not sure you'll understand this, but there's mechanical systems with open dampers. The heating systems require some fresh air coming in. When it's going to be down around single digits or zero, we try and close those dampers down so there's less cold air coming in and not overpowering the system. Secondly, we don't go into unoccupied mode. When we have a normal holiday weekend, we will go into unoccupied mode, which means they shut down, into the 60-degree range. It's unoccupied and we can come back. The third thing we do is, in fact, that we don't leave a building unoccupied with nobody seeing it or watching it for an extended period. We have a company that can come in and walk the whole building and check windows and doors and boilers, like I said, lighting systems and everything, odors. We don't want to come in on a Monday morning and have teachers arriving and student buses coming in and have there be an issue we're unaware of.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope that helps.
It does.
Any more comments?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
We're really voting on the bond resolution in front of us, and this is a resolution appropriating $5,236,342 for the costs of certain non-recurring capital projects, authorizing the issuance of such bonds to finance such appropriations. I think the boilerplate, as we've gone through, is similar to the last one we looked at. What has changed on this is just so you can confirm, if you go to Exhibit A,
Yep.
the items that are listed as included in this,
Mhm.
and the specific dollar amounts for those items.
I see.
All right, and you can see the item 10 is the Jennings boilers.
Right.
And Mr. Kiley, as you pointed out, that's $382,000 item.
Yes, thank you.
Any questions on the bond resolution before us?
No.
No.
All right, so the approval of this bond resolution has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments from the public on the bond resolution? Just come to the podium and state your name, please.
Tony Voldo, principal of Jennings, the object of your comments here. So in two regards, one to speak on the behalf of the community. So I think two of the questions at consideration here are being proactive. I think speaking as a parent who, in Orange, I live in Orange, and my son's school was shut down and they had to be relocated for 6 months. That was quite difficult.
Because of boilers?
Due to a pipe bursting on a cold day because boilers had failed and flooding the school. And then speaking as a husband, my wife was part of the McKinley movement. So on two of those occasions, the impact of students is great. As the administrator, I think being proactive in this case is what we're sort of talking about here. So I appreciate, in a very fiscally difficult environment, being proactive in that measure, because we cannot anticipate with the boilers. Yes, they've been fine. We've had 2 days. So to speak to the parents' comments, there's a couple of days where students, it hasn't gotten cold enough to shut the building down. Areas of the building take on different modes of heat at different levels. So in the media center, a couple other areas, the gymnasium, we had to wear coats. The after-school program had made a decision one day when the boilers had failed to close down because it was too cold in those environments what they occupied. So they made that choice as a separate entity program. And then the church group as well had some issues. So again, I realize that it's only a couple times, it may be an anomaly, but to run the risk is sort of what I'm advocating for. The impact of the environment in the school would be great. So I appreciate you considering it, reconsidering it, and bringing it forward.
If I might, just to clarify, since, and normally you don't ask the public questions, but since you're one of the players in this.
Sure.
You kind of opened yourself up there.
No, that's fine.
If you'd stuck with just dad and husband, we would have missed that.
That's all right.
Is it, how long have you been at Jennings?
This is my 8th year.
Okay. So is this 1 to 2 day a year thing normal or not? Is that,
No,
is it
we-
an anomaly or is it kind of what you normally get used to?
We haven't really experienced a lot of failure in the past, and I think, in cases where the weather is a bit warmer, you wouldn't have any impact. Obviously they can come in, they can do whatever they need to do. I think more recently with the weather, and I think what has brought it to the heightened awareness of my community, which, respectfully I would speak is a very quiet community in most regards, is that this has now happened more recently. So the failures have happened in the last 3 weeks, as your conversations have had in the last 3 weeks. So I think that has brought the community sort of awareness a little bit more to the forefront. So again, it doesn't happen often, and I think, again, they're 50 years old. I'm not a boiler expert. I lean to Tom and his recommendations in that regard.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Any further discussion here? Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The resolution goes back to the Board of Finance. All right, next up, item 11, to hear an update on bond refinancing from our Chief Fiscal Officer. Mr. Mayor, if you come up to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The topic is bond refinancing. We've issued some bonds in 2007, 2008, 2010, which are now callable. The term of these bonds is about 12 years. The interest rates currently are favorable, that the total debt service payments, given today's interest rates, we would save about $2 million by refinancing.
Wow.
And that's it.
Very favorable rates.
Now-
I would say.
That's the kind of presentation we like.
I'd like to refinance.
Okay,
What can I refinance?
I guess two things. One of the reasons we're doing refinancing, which we've done in the past, traditionally, this board would be voting on that. You had checked with some of the statutes concerning that and had determined it was just an RTM vote that was needed. We still wanted to update this board so that we knew what was going on. But could you give us some background in terms of, is that a change in the regulation, or is that just a new interpretation, or what's the scoop?
I don't remember the chapter, but Section 7-370C, I think, of the chapter of the state statutes, very specifically states that any refinancing is only needs to be, even notwithstanding, even if there's a difference in the charter, that only needs to be approved by the RTM. It's not an authorization of expenditure. When you normally do a bond resolution, you're basically authorizing spending money
Like
and then
with a new
borrowing the
school,
money.
Right, we're going to spend $10 million to build a new school, and we're going to bond at the same time.
Right,
So
so
the
you're-
authorization and,
Right, so you're voting to both authorize and borrow. Here, we're not voting to authorize to spend, we're just authorizing to change borrowings. So there's no Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance action required.
Can you just explain the savings, the $2 million savings? Is that over the life of the?
It's over the 12 years.
Over the 12 years.
And that will
So-
be determined, we don't really pick that. In other words, that's kind of like, we run models, that looks like what it would be approximately. But when we save that money compared to when, what we do is we have a bond auction. We go out to the underwriters and we say, okay, we're calling these bonds. We're going to call, the plan is to call these bonds. Who wants to buy the new bonds? And then the new bonds, then they give us an offer. And that offer will include coupon, premium, and the timing of the principal repayments. And then, so, based upon those three factors, the savings would be about 1.9 million, but those three factors determine what years the savings will be. But they're not exactly spread
I
out, but
see.
they're kind of erratic up and down
Okay, so over the course of 12 years.
over the course of 12
we will
years.
save
The present
approximately-
value is 1.6 million.
Okay.
I think
Thank you.
one important clarification is when we refinance, we cannot extend the term of the bond. So we have to stay
Correct.
within
Has
the
to be- you have
original
to stay
term.
I
within the
see.
12 years.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
Because that's the term of the original bond,
Right.
that will be paid off in total in that period of time.
So there's no risk here, really, that we're missing?
No, if the
Correct?
interest rates
With
go
the
up, we
auction,
just
it's
don't do
still-
it.
Okay.
Yeah, if the economic environment, interest rate environment changes, we just put it on hold.
Okay. Thank you.
And we're looking at a range of 26 million to 35 million, depending upon the interest rate. And that's pretty much it.
All right. Any further comments or questions?
Just quickly, I mean, obviously, we're not here to debate state statute, and I understand that, but can we just get a little additional clarification on the comments about a refinancing not having to go to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance? It doesn't seem intuitive, number one, but state statutes always don't, I understand that. It just, and it's not what we've done in the past, so maybe we've done it either more thoroughly in the past than we needed to, or even incorrectly, if that's the right word. Do we, I mean, are we good with that? I mean, what are,
Mr.
Do we
Mayor,
have
Because
the
The
that's-
stats,
statute in front of us?
I underlined for you.
Yeah. I see
In
it.
the center of the paragraph, and
Yeah.
it's pretty clear. The first selectman asked me to confirm and get a statement from bond counsel that we were reading it correctly, which I have, and I can pass out if you like. It's one paragraph.
that was my next question, if we had an opinion from the town attorney, or,
Well, we actually went to bond counsel rather than town attorney.
fair enough.
And forgive the strange from email address. He sent it from his wife's email account because his office was out of power.
So this refers back to your page 3, which is the 7-370C. Okay.
With
Correct.
the legislative body,
Exclusively rest with the legislative body.
right?
All right.
And as it states in that final sentence there, overrides any other statutes, specifics,
Okay.
acts, or charter provisions.
Okay. And is, just to be clear, is the definition of a legislative body within the town of Fairfield exclusively the RTM, or do we count as a legislative body technically, legally, under any definition?
You are the executive body.
So
We actually, if I could recognize Ms. Kennelly, who's
Sure.
dealt with a lot of these definitions over the years.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. No, I'm looking for help, yeah.
No, the Board of Selectmen...
Eileen, if you could come to the mic.
The Board of Selectmen is definitely the executive
Okay.
body, and only the RTM is the legislative body.
Okay.
So I believe this interpretation is correct, that only the RTM would have the effective say as to whether these
Right,
bonds should be
right.
issued.
That makes perfect sense based on my knowledge. I was just seeing if there was any wiggle room within the definition of legislative body to include us.
I don't believe there
You
is.
do not believe so. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Bob, thank you for the additional information from bond counsel as well.
All right.
Any further questions from the board?
At this
All right.
time, no.
All right, then, thank you for saving
Thank
us
you
$2
very
million.
much. I know, it's huge.
It's not me, it's the economy. But thank you
But
for your
still.
attention.
Thanks, Bob.
We'll all take credit for the economy.
You have to take advantage of the economy.
That's right.
That's right.
All right, then, next up, from the Director of Health, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Health. This item was postponed from January 21, 2015. Resolved that funds be transferred from an increase in grant revenue in the amount of $10,463 to cover the cost of a cardiovascular disease prevention program. focusing on policy environmental change for citizens served by the Fairfield Health Department. And further resolved that the first selectman is authorized to make, execute, and approve on behalf of the town of Fairfield any and all contracts or amendments thereof with the State of Connecticut Department of Health. The costs are 100% reimbursable by a 10/1/2014 to 6/30/2015 State of Connecticut Preventative Health and Health Services Block Grant. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
And again, this is back before us. We had a chance to talk about this a bit at our last meeting. Let me just ask Mr. Cleary to come to the mic and give us
Sure.
any updates that on anything that's happened in between here.
Sure. Well, you heard the presentation before. You asked for 11 points of clarification or documentation to be provided. So I'll address those 11, if I may. Sure. You asked for a review of all liabilities related to the program and a review of and provide an example of to the town attorney of the liability waiver and have his opinion on that. Eileen Kennelly will address that. You asked the town attorney to confirm that only the Board of Selectmen has to approve the resolution. The town attorney did confirm that that was his opinion, that only the Board of Selectmen needs to approve this resolution. You asked for further documentation or clarification on what the criteria for success for this program will be. What are our measures? What are our timelines? We met as a group several times since the last meeting and have decided that we will look basically at the end of this first riding season. We will do a number of types of assessments. We'll be doing initial monthly assessments as we sort of tweak the program, if approved. But at the end of the first riding season, November, December, so we'll do an assessment of exactly how many times the bikes were checked out. We will have either a check-in survey where we'll ask a variety of questions about the type of use they used it for, the riding time, the miles estimate, satisfaction with the program, any suggested improvements. In addition, we'll, on the waiver form that they sign, we'll collect their email address, and at the end of that first riding season, we'll do a more comprehensive survey where we'll look at some of the issues of where there might have been problems and essentially gathering some opinions on their satisfaction with the program, their thoughts on the program. We will make an assessment at the end of that time period to say if the program was robustly used, and that'll be gauged by the number of times the bikes were checked out, whether there was problems in that the bikes were so frequently used that there weren't enough bikes for the people, that we'll look at that point, we'll consider what other options are available for expansion. Whether it's simply providing a few more bikes that would resolve the issue, or considering a larger scale program that we would look to secure some additional grant funds. That would be an assessment made based upon that end of riding season assessment. If it's a moderately used program or a lightly used program, we have the option of just keeping it as it is, and we will work with just maintaining the program in that manner. You asked for further documentation about the process of checking in and checking out the bikes. I'll do a very brief one. Nancy is here from the library, the deputy town librarian, right? And she'll give a little bit more detail, but basically the patrons will approach the desk, they'll ask for a bike, they'll fill out a waiver if it's not already on file. Once that form is collected, their library card will be scanned, or a copy of a driver's license will be obtained. The helmet and a key will be provided to the lock. The patron will be asked on the waiver to inspect the bike prior to use. If there's any problems, to come back in, make the librarian aware of it. If it's something as simple as pumping up a tire, we can do that. We'll provide pumps. If it's something more, they'll just be given another bike, and we'll have the bike maintained or serviced. Essentially, after riding the bikes, they'll be asked to sort of report any problems as well. You asked if there would be any fees charged, and we considered this initially, and we decided for this pilot study that we would eliminate any fees, that the bikes would simply be, like most other library materials, free. So that's what we decided there. You asked how likely problems will be addressed, like stolen bicycles and late returns and things like that. So we decided stolen bicycles would be treated as a crime and reported to police. Bikes not returned on time, there'll be attempts made to contact the user and to obtain information about why the bike wasn't returned. Bikes returned after closing time, the helmets can be locked to the bicycles and the keys can be placed in the slot. And then bikes not returned by midday the following day without any kind of contact or explanation from the person who checked it out will be treated as a crime and referred to police. So, and again, we're not looking to be heavy on enforcement. We want the bikes used. If somebody calls and says, listen, you know, I had a personal situation and can I bring it back the following day, fine with us. You know, we're not looking to be heavy enforcers. You asked what kind of educational campaign will accompany the bike share program, the launch of the bike share program, and we talked about that, and we are planning to have a launch day event, if you will, where we'll highlight the bikes, we'll ask the press to attend, we'll do press releases, promote it on the town and departmental websites, Facebook pages, Twitter pages. We'll plan an active living information series that will sort of highlight the bikes initially. We'll include, the library already has a wellness series that we will include the awareness of and information about the bikes, as well as the health department has a variety of 10 different programs that we offer throughout the year that will include awareness of the bicycles in our regular programming. We'll develop and have available a best bike routes available at check-ins for each different location, and we will schedule and promote events like bike and hike events where you bike to a location, take a hike, whether it be the beach or Lake Mohegan. We'll do bike meetup events where it's essentially people riding together at different locations. And then we'll work with we talked about working with the Fairfield Museum, which has a walking tour of historic properties, to look at if we could develop a self-guided tour a bike tour of historic properties in town, where somebody at the library could check out a bike. We'd offer them a pamphlet of a self-guided tour of historic properties, and they could sort of ride themselves to those properties and read information about the different homes that are there. We'll work with the Historical Society on that, or the Museum and History Center. You asked to provide a copy of the proposal submitted to the state. I believe that was included in the information. The state now has gone to this complicated Excel spreadsheet where we stick information in certain fields, and that is essentially our application.
Okay.
And then you had asked if the delay in this approval will affect our ability to get the grant. I spoke to the Connecticut Department of Public Health, and they said, nope, it only makes the time for you to implement it a little shorter. So we're good there. You would ask for to have the library staff come and present on the impacts for them and how they see it impacting the library. So I'll ask Nancy to come up, and then, or do we want to have Eileen come up first and address the liability issues?
I'd be happy to do that, but I just wanted to know, do you want copies of this, of the indemnification and waiver?
Yes.
I'll make
Please.
I'll make the copies.
Okay, very good. I have been in contact with Kerma, with our insurer, about this program, and in fact have been in contact with them off and on over the last few years while it's been discussed. They have not expressed any concern that we can't do this, or have expressed any concern that it would increase our premium to do this. They have had some suggestions about things like maintenance schedules, replacement of helmets when they wear out, things of that sort, quite concrete proposals. And we will be abiding by those, well, more than suggestions, I would say. They're not quite rules, but they are very strongly suggested guidance. And the gentleman who is giving us this advice is going to continue to give it to us as this program evolves, because things will change a little bit as time goes on. There may be things we want to change slightly. But the big things are, people should wear helmets. We should have the bikes maintained professionally and not try to do it ourselves. And that should be by contract with an outside provider. And in that way, we at least should be able to avoid any liability for poor maintenance, provided we stick with the schedule. We will want to make sure that helmets are both in good condition, and there is a useful life that helmets have, so that they will be replaced at the point where they have reached the end of their useful life. We probably will want to have some extra helmets just in case we have a problem. We want to be able to give somebody a helmet that's good rather than send them away. It is important that this program, at least at this time, be limited to persons over 18. Mm-hmm. We do not want any children riding these bicycles. And we don't want anyone other than the person who signs the document to be riding the bicycle. So if, let's say, both the husband and wife wanted to use the bicycle at different times while they had it out, they would both need to sign a document like that. They couldn't, one couldn't take it and then give it to another. We do believe that this waiver is worthwhile doing, and Stanton and I have discussed it. The wording is fine, but you need to understand that that does not guarantee in any way that we wouldn't be found liable. The courts in Connecticut have been very reluctant to allow persons to escape liability who would otherwise be liable, just because there's a waiver agreement. But it does help in that it points out a number of rules, a number of things people are agreeing to do, and should they fail to do those things, we would have a better argument. We probably can't charge for this program. If we were to do so, we might be in a position where we would be found to have no longer have governmental immunity. There is a doctrine by which actions of, or programs of government are divided into two categories: governmental programs and proprietary programs. Proprietary programs are programs where you charge money for them. And I have consulted with Attorney Jim Williams, who is advising us on the Trujillo case, and he tells me that there have been courts that have found that governmental immunity didn't apply, even where very small, comparatively speaking, to the operation being done, amounts of money were being collected, causing a waiver, or rather causing a failure of governmental immunity. So I think we're probably going to have to stick with not being able to charge for the program. It's possible, but I have not checked on this, that there might be able to be a fine for failure to return on time. But for the rental itself, it does not appear. I mean, it won't be a rental as such. It will be simply a use of the bicycle under this document.
Okay.
Are there any questions you have that I might be able to answer?
On board?
On liability, I have a couple.
Sure.
And I think you've touched on some of them. I
Okay.
mean, this is, I haven't read this yet. I'm sure it's a pretty thoroughly written
It
waiver.
is.
And it lays out the regs and rules and responsibilities and all that good stuff, right?
It does.
But when you get right down to it, somebody is getting onto a bicycle that's town-owned, library dispersed. And should something happen, regardless of what's here, we've seen it many, many times. The deep pockets to town becomes, the first or most likely source for a lawsuit to come. So what I'm hearing from you is that while this protects us, there's no complete protection with this, and that we could still be subject to litigation, lawsuits, etc.
That is correct. I think probably our better, defense, it doesn't keep us from getting sued, but our better defense is probably in the governmental immunity section, which essentially is we don't charge anything, this is a free program, and we let people just use the bikes.
Right.
There's really only one other way to protect the municipality from immunity, and that's to put it into a separate organization altogether.
Right.
But if the town is going to undertake it, those are the limits we have.
Okay. So being in the municipality bucket is the best place for us to be, as far as charging versus not charging,
Yes.
limits of liability and the risk, is what you're saying?
I think that is correct. As I say,
Okay.
Kerma will continue to give us guidance on the best way to do this,
Okay.
so that we will not, at least, I would hope there would be absolutely no ground to say that we were not following a good program to ensure, insofar as it is at all possible, the safety of the persons using the bikes. Now, we can't control what they do when they're out on the road,
Fair enough. Right.
but insofar as what we give them, we should be in a position to say, we gave you a bike that should have operated correctly. And I think we might want to, when, Sans was talking about giving people some kind of a brochure, a map showing them where there are sites of interest. We might want to mark on those maps, like the Post Road, and mark them as a highly trafficked road or something like that,
Right.
just to warn people so they don't accidentally turn on it and then suddenly discover that there's a great deal of traffic on it. But it would not be wise for us to outline a specific path, lest someone have a problem and say, "Oh, you told me to go that way."
Right, because both of our libraries are near quite busy roads. Fairfield
They are,
Woods and Post
and
Road, right?
that's correct.
Right. The wrong
And
turn hits you
there
into
are-
traffic pretty quickly.
So, yeah, so I think if we were to say, put a yellow highlighting on the Black Rock Turnpike or on the Post Road and just mark them as very busy roads, that would at least let people know, so that they wouldn't accidentally travel on them if they weren't local people and didn't know that
Right.
they were busy
And,
roads.
and again, we aren't directing them to the busy roads as well.
Pardon?
To paraphrase what you said, we would not want to be directing them toward a busy road.
No, that's correct. Or even towards a non-busy road, because you never know what might happen. So we don't really want to give any specific guidance.
Good. I think
We just
that's-
want to lay it out and give them a kind of a warning that there may be some places that are less safe.
Okay, so thank you for that. And my other question on liability is, and you touched on this as well, is our responsibilities as, maintaining the bikes, right? We have to do certain things, and we don't do them ourselves. We have to contract them out to a professional. Can you just touch on those topics again and provide some clarification on that?
Well, if we were to undertake to maintain them ourselves, let's say we had someone who was sufficiently familiar with bicycles that they said they would come to us and say, "I'm willing to volunteer to take care of this."
I can do this kind of a thing, yeah.
We would certainly then be responsible for whether they were maintained properly or not. If we enter into a contract with a vendor, a local, probably a very local vendor, to inspect and maintain the bikes every whatever period of time KERMA recommends, maybe it's a month, maybe it's every quarter, maybe it's every 6 months, but whatever it is, or maybe it's so many uses of the bike. But whatever that recommendation is, that's what we tell the bike company that's going to maintain it. Then they have to undertake to maintain it properly.
Right.
And if they give us back a bike that's, for some reason, they've forgotten to put oil in some place or something's broken, they didn't fix it, we can then go back and say, we have a contract with you, and you had agreed that you were going to do this properly, and you didn't. So it does give us some place to go in the event that they don't properly maintain the bike. But we do have to maintain the schedule then. If it's going to be so many times, we have to go to them and let them have the opportunity to fix it.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
On that, no.
I have just a question. This all comes out of a desire to address cardiovascular health. So if we see that a person goes up to the library and is maybe doesn't look the healthiest or whatever it is, and sometimes you see before engaging in this form of exercise, see your doctor, and do you know where I'm going? So is there anything in this waiver that protects us? Perhaps the person has an underlying health issue, or you may feel very uncomfortable as a librarian giving the person the right to ride this bike. I'm just wondering, are we covered? Because
Well, that's certainly an interesting question, but we could put something in saying that before you undertake any exercise program,
exactly
you
what I'm
should
getting at.
discuss it with your doctor. But we can't ask them to produce a
of
bill
course
of
not.
health
But
saying
I
that
do
I've
think
done
that
it.
it might
I think
be
the
worth
most we could do is
exploring.
just advise that they take it up with their doctor.
Okay.
And KERMA reviewed this.
Kermit
Waiver.
has taken a look at it. They have not given me all of their comments. They have given me some of their comments. They will give me anything further in the next week.
Okay. Can somebody tell us logistically, how does the program work? Where will the rentals take place? Where will they be returned to?
Nancy has
Thanks, Simon.
some comments regarding about the library aspects of it, but currently, right now, we are planning at Fairfield Woods Branch Library and the main library. We would have some division of bikes, probably 6 and 4, something like that, at the main versus the branch. And so that's what we're currently planning on, those 2 branches.
Okay, so we talked about some other locations around at some point, but we'd leave that for future
After the
expansion
pilot?
if
Yeah,
we chose to
right
do?
now, we're just looking at those two locations. This pilot study, try to figure out, what issues arise, what problems come up, what things do we need to address, how do we want to expand? So we've talked about a number of different things. The Recreation Department is on board. They'd love to have bikes there. I'm sure, Southport Pequot Library would love some. I haven't approached them. Addressing the maintenance issue, I did send an email, spoke to the manager of Zane's, and did send an email to both them and Psychology, the two bike shops in town, if they would be interested in sort of entering an agreement with us to maintain them for free, and with an exchange maybe for some labeling on the bikes to say maintained by these two cycle shops. So we're working on that. And Nancy wanted to address the question you had about
checkouts.
the process at the library.
Yeah, thank you. And I did want to say there are a couple of other public libraries in the country that are doing this. And I talked to two of them, and one of them has been in business for 3 years, and they have had no theft, no accidents, no anything. And the second one, which is in Winter Park, Florida, has had it for this past year, and they also have not had any theft, any problems, any maintenance issues or anything. It's been running very, very smoothly. So that's very encouraging, and it's been extremely popular in those libraries, so that's nice. So this is kind of a scenario of how the bikes would actually get checked out from the library.
Please.
And it's just, again, this is just kind of a scenario, and as we do it, like that first day, we're like, oh, we forgot about this, or we need to do that. So it's kind of what we think will happen, and I've run this by a couple of staff just to listen to me saying it to them and then saying, yeah, this will work, or no, I don't think you should do that, and that kind of thing. So this is kind of just a general view of what would happen. So it would have to start with our technical services librarian, who would actually have to create a record for the bike so that we would be able to track it in our library computer system. So once she created a record, we would then be able to attach a barcode to the bike, and we thought the easiest way to do that would be to attach the barcode to a lanyard that would, a person could wear around their neck, which would also have the key to the bike attached to it. So they would get that as the checkout. In order to check out the bike, a Fairfield resident would have to have an active library card, and they would also have to show a second piece of identification, which we are assuming would be a driver's license. And at that point, we would take a photocopy of the driver's license to keep it on hand for us in case there was a theft or something like that. At that time, they would fill out the waiver form, and they'd only have to fill it out once, because once they fill it out, we could put a note into the library card, into our system, saying that the waiver has been filled out and is on file. And we would actually keep those waiver forms at the library. We can scan them and keep them, on the computer, and also a paper copy of it. The patron would then receive a checklist, which we've kind of put together, go outside and make sure that everything on the checklist lines up with the bike itself. They would come back inside, they do an initial on the checklist that, yes, I've looked at the checklist, everything seems appropriate for the bike. And at that point, we would check the bike out to them and give them the bike helmet to go with it. We have the checkout for the whole day so that they could have it for the day. We thought we would have it for them to bring it back an hour before closing. Like San said, we're not going to go crazy if they return it. If they run into an issue, they need to bring it back in the morning, they give us a call. We're fine with all of that. All Connecticut residents can use library cards in all libraries in Connecticut, so that if a different resident from another town came in, they would run through the same thing with the driver's license and their card. We were also thinking one of the special things about this bike program is you might have company coming for the weekend, and you only have bikes for you and your husband or wife. So this would be a place where a guest could come to the library and check out some bikes for you guys all to do something together. So we'd have a special guest pass. And again, it would still run the same way with the driver's license, but they would use the guest pass for that. No overdues. Like San said, if the bike was not returned by the next day, we would call the police and file a report on it.
But as I said, the other libraries that I've talked to, none of them have had any kind of issues with bringing bikes back late or any of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what we're thinking in regards to the actual checkout of the bikes. We don't think, as far as staff time, I know one of the questions was about staff time, and it's amazing how returning a book to the library at times can take up to 15 or 20 minutes of a check back in if there is a problem with the book, with the patron, with paying fines. So we don't see this as a big time user. It's kind of like checking out a book. You're coming in, you're using your library card, and you're able just to check out the bike. We also, Sands and I had talked to Fairfield, the Bike and Walk Committee, that new committee, and they are very excited on it. They're on board with it, and they said that they would help us with the maps for the different areas in the community to go. I was kind of envisioning the branch bikes to go up towards the community garden up in that area, biking around. And my initial thought was thinking that people might, who don't have bikes, might try out the bikes, enjoy them, and then go out and buy their own bikes. And another, just as a side note, a couple of years ago, when we've been talking about this for so many years, I was doing something at McKinley School, and I was talking to the parents about it, asking them if they thought it was a good idea, if they'd be interested. And afterwards, one of the moms came up to me and said, I'm a single mom, I don't know how to ride a bike, would you ever have lessons on teaching my kid how to ride a bike? And I was like, you know, that could be a learning experience, so that might be another type of program that we could have. You know, bring your child and maybe bring some people in from this bike and walking committee to, you know, teach kids how to ride bikes. So there's all different kinds of possibilities that we can do in regards to the bikes, besides just checking them out. So we're excited about it. So
Thank you.
I don't know if you have any questions.
I have a quick question. Can you reserve a bike ahead of time?
We've talked about it, and right now my thought is no, but that's not to say that we can't have that happen. I don't know. We'll have to.
It's just, yeah, because you'd hate to disappoint people, or if the bike is checked out for the full day,
Right.
you know, you
That's
hopefully will have that problem, that you'll have this
Right.
over this great demand. I really appreciate all the work that you've put in this since we last spoke, because I can see it now in terms of how exciting it truly is, and I love the way you've tied in some of the special promotions, the best bike routes and the bike and hike events. I can imagine going to the branch and biking down to Lake Mohegan and then hiking around Lake Mohegan and then biking around that area. That's terrific. And the self-guided tour of the historic properties
isn't
is
that
brilliant.
great?
I
Yeah.
mean, really, I can really see how you can promote this and get a lot of excitement going for the program. So
And
great job.
it's great, even like we were saying, people, you know, maybe this is dreaming big, but you know, maybe somebody coming from New York City,
Exactly,
coming
that's what I was
here,
thinking.
taking a bike and being able to drive and try some restaurants, maybe do some shopping, and not have to walk it, and it just kind of becomes another experience for people to have
Attracts
in
people
a
to Fairfield.
unique, fun way.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Just a quick one, and Nancy, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
That's very helpful. And you mentioned the two libraries that you've spoken to across the country. I
Yeah.
believe last time around, Sands mentioned, I believe you mentioned that in some areas it had been successful, in some areas it may not have been as successful. Could you follow up on that? And if that is a true statement, can you talk about the places that maybe it wasn't as successful as it should have been, and why?
it wasn't libraries.
It wasn't the library-based
Well,
ones that have.
it was not
Some of the
library-based.
larger scale ones have problems. And the biggest problem that most bike shares have, the cost comes from employing staff to relocate bikes from one location to another. So if you've got, like City Bike in New York City, for example, they've got, you know, lots of staff members. Their sole job is to go pick up bikes that went from one side of the city to the next and bring it back to a station where they're free, you know, check-in slots. And so, you know, that's been a big problem with a lot of bike share programs, is that maintaining that staff level. Maintenance of the bikes is an issue sometimes. And so we're trying to, with this, just keep it small to say, you know, you have to bring the bike back to where you got it. And, you know, we'll take care of the maintenance, you know, locally. And so, but some of those big bike shares, even City Bike recently was bought out by another company that took it over that they were having some issues with. I believe it was Montreal had a problem with their bike share program where another round of investors had to come in and support it for another round to try to improve it. So there have been programs like that. And some of the ones where it's volunteer based. I've read that the volunteer support is there initially, and then it wanes, and then you end up with bikes that don't work. So.
Okay. Thank you. Sure. Appreciate that.
Any further questions?
Just a question for us. Did we get clarification earlier that this only comes before us? It will not go to other boards? Is that definitive? Okay.
That was I think, question we all had coming
Yeah.
up our last meeting.
Yeah. So the answer is it comes to us and
Yes, I
that's
think
it.
Sands addressed that as part of his memo to us, that
Yeah.
you confirm with the town attorney that this is something that only,
Yes,
Yes.
I spoke to Stan.
That's correct. So it doesn't go to the legislative body or the
No.
Board of Finance,
That-
even though we're accepting a grant and all that
We're
stuff?
accepting, we are, well.
probably best to do it from the
Yeah.
mic, if you would.
Yes, we're accepting a grant, but
Mm-hmm.
it is my understanding that unlike some other grants where the money goes into the general fund, this goes into a special account, so that it's not something that you have to take out of general town funds. And that's where you have to appropriate, is if it's coming out of the general fund, you would have to appropriate the money. We do get grants that do go into the general fund. So part of the thinking here is that this is different from some grants.
What would this be similar to, just so I can have an analogy of another grant that would come to us similar to this that wouldn't have to go to subsequent boards?
It would have to be something that was for a specific purpose,
Mm-hmm.
as this is, and could only be used for that purpose, and was kept separately from our general fund accounts.
So the first two don't differentiate it between normal grants. Is the third one, the third point about the funds being kept separate, that sounds different than
I think
anything we've done for...
I think that would be the most unique aspect, yes.
And why is that with this?
I understand that probably because it is for such, I think it's because it's for such a specific purpose.
Okay.
And perhaps because the state rules require it.
Okay.
Just if I might.
Yeah, please.
In terms of that, if it's okay. I don't recall any directly that came to the Board of Selectmen and not the other two boards.
That's why I'm asking the questions,
I do recall,
right? Yeah.
I have learned of some that either went directly to the fire department, and they spent it from there, went to the police department, and they spent it from there. I think the library may have gotten some direct on that. I might be off a bit there, because I'm not clear in my memory whether it went to the Friends of the Library or the library. but,
Okay.
and I think the senior center has gotten some.
Okay.
So they didn't come before this board, but they did come to the town. They were for specific purposes. Police and fire, it might even been certain Homeland Security grants, that type of thing. And so they were used, and they certainly didn't get into the general fund from that standpoint.
Okay.
I don't mean to say that's a comprehensive list. I'm not trying to.
Sure.
But those are the things that come to mind. I don't remember something coming before this board and not going
Correct.
someplace else. But it may be
I
because this is
believe
not.
it has happened at
Okay.
times, and
Okay.
they've always been small grants. There's never been any $100 million grant or $50 million
Right.
grant that has not gone to the other bodies. But there have been a few in the $10,000, $15,000 category
And
that
certainly
have not gone on.
the Board of Ed certainly has those from time to time, so it's not like.
Yeah.
But any grant that we get, any money that we get, certainly should be going through the finance department. It shouldn't just be going directly to,
Well, it goes to
to
the
a
finance
department.
department because the checks get written out of there, and the
Yeah.
departments I mentioned don't have separate bank accounts.
right,
from that
exactly,
standpoint.
that's what I mean. So they're
But
kept
they're monitored
presumably.
and measured out of that.
Right,
I'm just not quite clear, so could we double-check that?
sure.
That would help me understand.
Do we have anything
Why?
in writing for that? Let's be clear, you don't want to double check and just get the town attorney to say, yes, that's what I said. You're looking for.
I'm sure that Stanton would be
Well-
happy to put something brief together for you on
I
it.
think that would suffice. Yeah, I'd just like to get an opinion, not just what we should be doing, but why and why it's different. I'm not seeing it being that different, at least on paper. So that, hence my questions. Okay.
Okay.
If I
Thank you.
may, I mean, it's in the cover.
Sands, if you could, from the
Sure.
mic, please.
You know, in the, sort of addressing what Bob was talking about before, having it only go before the RTM.
Right.
In the cover page of the contract, it requires a resolution from the town's, now I'll make sure I get it,
Does it say governmental body?
yes, town's governmental body as opposed to legislative body. And so that in the contract, it asks for a resolution authorizing Mike to sign from the governing body, not the legislative body. So that's, was the opinion that we sort of forwarded to Stanton and reviewed that. So the state is saying it only has to go to the governing body.
That is correct. As far as the state's concerned, this is the only body that has to approve this. Any other approvals from their perspective are superfluous.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, any further questions? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote, or any further discussion?
I have a couple points. You know, we all went on a wonderful library tour this past weekend, and I mean, Nancy, what you and your team and everyone does there is just fantastic. The programs, the education, I mean, everything that you provide to our town is top-notch, best in state, one of the best in the country, and I certainly appreciate that. I'm a little, and I can't put my fingers on it, I'm just not quite there yet, understanding and feeling that this is really an appropriate and efficient use of our library. Now, I think it's a bit expansive, if that might be the right word, as far as programs go. But you say you can get over that, and you say you can manage it. There's maintenance involved, and I won't go through all the reasons, but I do think it's a bit more than maybe some people think it is. I think it's going to, this program has the possibility of growing into something both in size and economically than we may not know about today. I certainly applaud the efforts, and I certainly love the vision, and I like the fact that we're cutting edge and we're looking forward, and there isn't a better library in the state. I'm very proud of that. I'm just not quite there as this being an appropriate best use of the library. But beyond that, I think I can get past that. What's really catching me is the liability issue. Because as we know, and as we've seen, and as we've had to deliberate on many, many times, the town is the subject of lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit for all kinds of things. And I am concerned that the town is promoting and supporting something that's going to put people on bikes that we're allowed, or that we are required to maintain in traffic, with or without regulations and maps. There's just something about that that unnerves me economically and legally. And it's going to be difficult for me to support this measure, mainly because of that. It's just difficult for me to get past the fact that I think we're putting ourselves in a situation where it might come back to bite us. And for that reason, I am not going to vote for this.
Okay. Okay. Any comments?
I will be supporting this. I think it's a great program. It's a pilot program, and I think that's what we have to keep in mind, that this is a way for us to put our toe in the water, so to speak, or get on the bike, so to speak. I think there are opportunities. I think having the bikes at the library is brilliant because it drives people to the libraries. They're used to going in. But we don't know where it's going to go. If it's successful, as somebody mentioned before, it could be our Parks and Rec department that takes this and has bikes housed there. It may go beyond the libraries. I'm not sure, but I think that it's a visionary program. I'm very excited about it, and I will support it.
In looking at this, you know, and I hear Mr. Kiley's comments. I think that those are well reasoned and definitely we're thinking. I also appreciate the fact that, to the extent that you could, you try to address those ahead of time in terms of talking to our insurance company, looking at the liability, talking to other programs that exist, and finding out what has worked for them and what hasn't, and what the concerns are. I think long-term, if it is successful, because we can't charge for it, I'm not sure the town can ever cover the costs of this. So it may be something we have to find another organization to actually sponsor, which in the long run addresses some of the points Mr. Kiley's making.
Potentially, yes.
Because let's say this is successful. Let's say we want to get 100 bikes or 200, then all of a sudden we need more people to manage it because the existing staff everywhere can't just do that. So I'm thinking when you can't charge for it and you've got the liability issues if you do, that it may at some point be moving this on to another organization to more fully kind of manage this and address that and keep it out of town. But I think as a pilot, because we're an organization as a town that can accept a grant, because we can in fact test this, I really like the fact that we're testing it at the libraries, specifically the downtown library, because it's close to downtown where we've done some recent improvements in terms of sharrows and bikeways and walking ways, and are trying to encourage walking and biking in that area that would support our merchants. It would allow people to come in on the train. It would allow, I think, reinforce a lot of what we've done in terms of thinking through our downtown. So I'm going to support it for that, but long term I'm worried about, if you can get this, that it is successful and that it's actually too big for the town, because if we can't get any revenue to support it, then it becomes a challenge. And especially if folks are willing to pay for it, that it should be something that long-term. So I think we've got a grant to cover it. We, in essence, get to test it for the community to see if this makes sense. But I think there are a number of longer-term issues. If it doesn't work, then the answers are all easy. If it does work, I think that we have to think through those long-term issues, including the points that Mr. Kiley is making. But as Ms. Marmion said, one of the things that keeps our library the best in the state is innovative ideas like this. It's not just about books. It's more about people and what's going on. I like the fact that there's collaboration between our health department and our library in terms of something like this, both in getting... And risk manager, in terms of getting the grant, putting together the program that takes advantage of our existing capabilities, but also looks at what we can do for residents and their long-term health, but also fits within the vision of less car usage and more bike and pedestrian capability. It is ironic, though, that in order to rent our bike, you do have to have a driver's license. But I'll let that one go for now. So any further discussion before we vote?
Okay, thank you.
All right, all in favor? All opposed? All right, you got that, Jen? All right, thank you. And thank you for the presentation.
It was very well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. And I also appreciate the thorough way that you answered the questions raised by the
Yes,
board.
very
Very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you to both of you
Realize.
for that.
Next up, Director of Public Works to hear a report on Fairfield, Town of Fairfield's Sustainability Plan. Mr. Bowman.
Oh, do I need to move?
Well, I think, yeah, it's going to be...
You're gonna go up here?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we do that?
Just some water. This takes to warm up.
Oh, that's going to take a minute to warm up.
Yeah.
I'll take a minute.
Can we take a 2-minute break? I just got to get something to drink.
Yeah, sure.
I just need to get some water.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
All right. As you can see, the title, this is something we've been looking for a while. It defines sustainability, which is something I thought was important to try and define it. And it basically talks about everything is based on a simple principle. What we need for our survival and well-being depends either directly or indirectly on a natural environment. And strategies include resiliency or managing the way human development interacts with the natural environment in a sustainable way. Our principles were conserve depletable resources, maximize green power, minimize toxic discharge to the air, water, and land, and we think we've succeeded dramatically. In 2015, each year thereafter, we'll be saving almost $2.5 million in avoided energy costs in the town budget from the following: conserving and generating 11 million kilowatt hours of electricity and saving 1.3 million, convert from heating fuel to natural gas, saving 371 gallons of heating fuel and $906,000 a year, and that's net of the extra cost of gas, and competitive bidding for 7 million kilowatt hours of electricity for $270,000. I say
$7 million. I'm not including the Board of Education, this is just the town side. In addition, the greenhouse gas and criteria pollutant reductions are pretty significant if you're looking at green reductions. Look at particulate matter, 2,000 tons, and 95% reduction from what we were doing 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And it's the particulate matter which is gets in your lungs and causes all kinds of respiratory diseases, especially in children and the aging. How do we get there? Well, show energy conservation, no energy efficient equipment, on-site generation of microturbines, cogeneration, and photovoltaic. Again, saving 11 million kilowatt hours of electricity in a year and 1.5 million on that particular item. And this goes through a list of specific buildings and projects for the photovoltaic that we're putting in place. Either are built now or will be built by the end of the year. And there's a handout here for you to take with you. So. How do we get there? Again, heating fuel, $1,100,000 in savings every year. Subtracting the extra cost of natural gas, that's $855,000 a year. We don't need to go through that, I don't think. But during this time, we've also added an awful lot of cost and energy usage. We've added $813,000 in electricity costs, 59% increase over the last 15 years. Another $4.6 million in electricity consumed, $55,000 in natural gas costs, and 45,000 CCF of natural gas consumed, and another 9,000 tons of greenhouse gases. So it's not all positive. As we've added on, but we've also created more problems. Where did the new costs come from? The water pollution control expansion, new and expanded buildings, 11 new and 2 additions, 184,000 square feet added, equipment upgrades, and desktop computers. Addition of 5 private benefit facilities, which we didn't have: Fairfield Theater Company, the tennis bubble, cell towers, Child's Garden School, and electricity for the marina. Have all been added that weren't there before. Now, what's going on in the future is, technology is evolving faster than you can think, really. The following energy conservation measures we look at to be used: LED, induction high performance fluorescent lighting, computer-driven wireless automated controls for lighting and HVAC. And the new thing, the variable volume and temperature devices, allowing lighting, air conditioning, and machine operations on a room-by-room basis or a machine-by-machine basis. In effect, every room becomes its own. Okay, very good. We put that in the police department already and the fire department, so it'll be in the library next, and hopefully this building next year when we come back for more money.
Yes, please.
Don't worry, I'll be back. Now, energy dashboards, which allows the building manager to see what's going on at each piece of equipment in real time, control it, provide better preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance. It also allows you to try and figure out if you see you're using too much electricity. It'll tell you why you're using too much electricity. You can tweak, turn the temperature down a couple of degrees, turn back the pumps a little bit, and try and get that cost down, because that affects the demand. What you see on the wall out here is the first step in our energy dashboard. UI approved that, we've installed it, but nothing's attached to it yet until next year when we come back for some more money. Then that'll show us everything that's going on in the building in real time. It'll also allow the public to be able to see it, and the building manager will be able to control it from his laptop. And the big thing there is when you can see this going on in real time, you can prevent problems from happening for your rooftops and other equipment before they really happen. You see some little thing wrong, you go up and fix it before it becomes a major thing. That's it's really worked well at the sewage treatment plant. It has thousands of pieces of equipment down there. It really works well there. Also, prevent from cyber hacking from microgrids, distributed generation, because it's cloud data storage, so it's not on the net, which keeps it further protected from hacking. The other thing here is the ductless heating and cooling equipment and solar hot water systems, which we haven't put in yet, but we'll target that for the recreation center and other places that have a lot of use of hot water. Now, future energy management means primary electricity management, conservation of generation. It's the second largest line item in the budget after personnel. That's after the savings. Now, the use is divided into 3 categories, really: building, lighting, street lighting, traffic lighting, and the water pollution control facility. When you look at buildings, there's 6 factors to evaluate: age, size, hours of use, seasonality, KWH usage, and KW demand. Now, the KW demand has gone from 10% of electric bill to over 40% of electric bill in the last 10 years. So that's becoming a tremendously expensive property we need to work on. When you look at all those factors, these are the 10 buildings that remain the primary targets. They use 80% of the building electricity in the town. And these are the ones we'd be targeting over the next 5 years. How the electricity is used in the building also determines the conservation measures to pursue. There are 4 broad categories. Lighting, which can be up 50 to 55% of the total usage of a building. Air conditioning, 14% on average. Not as much as you think, because it's only used seasonal. In our largest buildings, its average is 12%. Plug load, which can be up to 5 to 20%, and that's all the computers and everything else that's plugged in the building. You can control those by shutting them off at night and turning them back on in the morning. An hour before people get to work, they'll never even know they're on or off. That's the big thing. Also, machinery and pumps. You know, all this heating and air conditioning that's pumped around the building constantly, that can take 5 to 20% of the load. And this new VVT system will shut down those machinery and pumps. From now we're really working every hour of the day we're here. There's always air being pumped through. This will stop that from happening. So here's our future. We're looking at, you know, saving $100,000 in lighting, well, $21,000 in air conditioning, plug load $14,000, another $14,000 machinery and pumps. So look for another $149,000 savings at 813 kilowatt hours. In street lights, we're looking to try and convert them all to LED lighting, and UI is working with us on that. They have a program, so we're working with them to be the next town if we can get there. And that'll save $175,000 just in generating costs, because we'll be using 70% less electricity than we are now. Traffic lights are all LEDs. There's nothing to be saved there. And at the water pollution control, you know, there's an energy dashboard and other audit measures can save another $52,000, so $250,000 there. And we'll continue with more green power initiatives. We're looking at the wastewater treatment plant to put cogen in where we're just venting methane into the air now, taking that and making electricity. That'll make over 800,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. And it also shows you what's left after we do that, what will be left in the building to either purchase or come up with another plan. But these are the different buildings we'd like to add PV to over the next 3 or 4 years. Now, the sustainability plan will achieve great success with the plan's 3 principles. Conserve depletable resources, 7.5 million gallons of heating fuel saved, 70 million cubic feet of natural gas saved, maximizing green power, 79 million kilowatt hours of solar power will be made, 68 million kilowatt hours of low emission power will be made over this period of time. Reduce emissions, 175,000 tons of greenhouse gases will be avoided, and 158 tons of mercury avoided. So summary, a long-term economic value of the sustainability would be $54 million of taxpayers' money saved over 20 years and 285 million kilowatt hours of electricity. To sum it up, this plan has been evolving since the beginning, from energy conservation plan to an asset management plan to the sustainability plan, from looking at deferred maintenance to preventive maintenance and now predictive maintenance. From just reducing tax dollars spent to reducing the consumption of depletable resources to reducing harmful emissions and to increasing sustainability. And that's it. That's it.
Thank you. Why don't we ask them from upstairs?
Yep.
At the microphone?
Yeah, I thought I'd go through the whole thing first before questions.
Oh, thank you.
Correct.
Mr. Kiley, go right ahead.
Just a quick one. Mr. Bowman, thank you for everything, your efforts and the presentation and what you've done and continue to do for us on the green energy and savings. I have one, thanks.
I have one as well. We have it in our packets. Yeah.
If you jump back to slide 16, where you're talking about the future for electric savings,
Yep.
and you have the 10 buildings, are they listed there in order of the amount they use, or in order of which ones you want to go attack first?
When we get there.
It's on slide 16. I just don't know what order that list is.
There really is no specific order. I mean, I would say that the first 3 are, you know, prime goals. The first 4.
The first 4?
The first 3 are the oldest buildings in town.
Mm-hmm.
Independence Hall needs a tremendous amount of work to bring it up to date. It is not that old, but it's still a 1975 building. It's a 79 building.
Mm-hmm.
Smith Richardson Clubhouse again, the 1972 building. We're waiting on that to see if there's what's going to happen with the clubhouse. There's going to be a building committee or whatever. And we're ready to work with the building committee on any of that. Police headquarters, but we just did the police headquarters, so that's good.
Okay.
The Fairfield Theater is also doing renovations, and we're working with them to come up with a lot of different measures. And they're happy to work with us and our energy consultant. We can go get them UI money like we got ourselves, so they're working with us there.
Okay,
The main library, we just appropriate the money for.
that's right.
Pulver's Garage and Operation Hope. But all these buildings, it's continuous improvement. As technology changes, we're
Right.
coming back to give more and more improvements. So it's hard to say, other than the first three, which are the biggest need.
So the first three are your top three priorities in order of work you'd like to do in...
Well, first four.
First four, okay. Where you'd like to attack first?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for all of your efforts. This is terrific. I guess my question, or it's hard for me, I know there are savings, but then I'm looking at the investment that we're making, the cost to the town in terms of, for example, what we just approved for the town library for the HVAC system. So it'd be very useful for me to say, what sort of investment do we need to make for some of these things? And then what's the return? For example, looking at the dashboard, these dashboards, I don't know how much something like that costs.
About $25,000.
Right, so maybe, not right now, but in the future, it would be great to see the estimated cost of each of these items. For example, the LED streetlights, I know are very expensive, but then measure that against the savings over time would be very interesting.
Some of these, like the LED light won't cost us anything. That's part of a UI program.
Right.
And most of the programs we've done today have not required a local investment at all. All the PV, or power purchase agreements, have been zero cost. All the energy conservation measures have been funded by UI either through a loan and a grant, except for 3 cases.
Right.
The police station and 2 at the sewage treatment plant. So out of $2.5 million, we've invested about $500,000. So out of this total program, we've only invested about $500,000 to get, $2.5 million savings a year.
Which is very useful to understand.
No.
That's
But going
I'm just trying to
forward,
get
see, again, the low-hanging fruit has been done first. Going forward, there's going to be more town share, because it's simply just, if you just do the lighting, it's no problem. But if you want to do a comprehensive program
Sure.
and attack the whole building at once, there's going to be a town share. And that's what I'll try and bring forward.
That would be very useful.
Mr. Bowman has been exceptional, both in identifying this cost savings, and I tell you, looking at the strain our budgets are under, getting this kind of savings every year, this is not a one-time number. The $2.5 million a year is huge. That literally, drops our overall tax rate by 1%. But I'm also very impressed that you find grants to get so much of it done. So we not only get the savings, we don't have to make the investment up front,
Sure.
or it's a very small investment relative to the savings we get out of that. But as we do get more, I think we have, as to Ms. Marmion's point, want to take a look at the costs along with that.
So I think it's not just me. Remember, this whole department has been working very hard, and with other departments also, to get this done. I'm just a spokesman, but there's a lot of work being done here by other people.
And just to help, future projects, these are included in the waterfall chart, so we can kind of get a
Yes.
flavor for what's
Sure.
happening there. So as you'll see some of those pop up as we review our capital plan from time to time.
Well,
This is my goal, is to come up with a 5-year plan, but just with these buildings, on an annual basis, what it will cost, the estimate of what UI will pay for, the estimate of what we can get other sources, show you the net cost and the net return on investment. And maybe looking for some innovative financing methods, like municipal tax exempt leasing, which it doesn't count as debt, because it's subject to an annual appropriation. You do that, if you had whatever the size of the program is, you'd have a 10-year program. And whatever you appropriate in the first year would what you'd appropriate for the next 9 years, and the savings would cover the cost. So you would save equal to the debt, and it's not a debt because it's subject to annual appropriation. Companies are willing to spend money gambling, the towns will pay the bill, so they don't have to pull out their boilers or whatever, and that's the big thing that's going on now. With working with the Connecticut Green Bank, who helps guarantee these things. So that's what I'd like to put forward after the budget's over.
Yeah. No, and the other point there is one of the things the state has done, I think exceptionally well in the last few years that I've seen, is come up with more innovative ways in order to help towns make the investment to get the energy savings. So as much as we have expensive power here in Connecticut, we're getting help from UI and the state in different programs to do that. So again, the third area that Mr. Bowman has really helped out is in understanding all those new programs coming out, understanding the rules, so that we find which ones we qualify for and which ones we get the most benefit for. And he's put in a tremendous amount of time on that. There isn't any handbook at the state. I would venture to say that Mr. Bowman is one of the top 4 or 5 people in the state in terms of understanding all this. I don't know who the other 4 are, though, by the way, Ed.
I'm at town.
I'm pretty sure. And I didn't want to say you were the only one, so but you're the only one I know of, and I don't hear of anybody else is doing it. And when I listen to people at the state, in terms of comments back on Mr. Bowman and how they listen to him, Ed has actually sat down with Deep and had them change programs because he's pointed out how they don't work. They've listened to Ed and then modified the program so it does work, and then we've been able to participate in it because of that.
You know, a good example of that, I think, is the program at the Water Pollution Control Facility. You know, we're getting the grant to raise it and make it flood proof. As a result of that, the state asked us to submit the grant for a microgrid at the treatment plant. It was turned down because it wasn't raised in the 100-year flood plan. Now that we're doing it, they've asked us to resubmit it. And this time, there's no local share. It's even better.
Well, and I think somewhere in there, Mr. Bowman, you pointed out that since so many Connecticut towns are along the coast, and since most water treatment facilities are located in the lowest point, they're all in the flood zone.
Right.
So if you create a program that wasn't allowed to be in a flood zone, you're basically eliminating all the coastal Connecticut towns. And Mr. Bowman was able to articulate that and get us to qualify and save us a town share, I think, at the same time, if I remember correctly. Because the state is actually applying on our behalf, so technically they're not a town. So thank you in spades for everything that you've done.
And I just want to add that it's not just the savings, which frankly are stunning, stunning, but also in terms of just keeping our environment clean and contributing to savings in that respect.
Yeah,
That's huge.
The amount of tons of particulate matter and gases that are not going into the atmosphere are just phenomenal. I would certainly agree with that.
That amazed me, too.
Any further questions?
No.
All right. And
Thank you.
Mr. Bowman, officially on behalf of our board and the town, thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
And to your
I forgot
department.
what I'm doing here now.
All right. Next up, we have the Fairfield Ludlow High School Building Committee, and this is to hear an update from the Building Committee. So, Mr. Donald.
Good evening, everybody. Mark Donald, Chairman, Fairfield Ludlow Building Committee.
Good to see you.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Pleasure. Since the last time I updated you, we've made quite a lot of progress. We have officially broken down, and just to avoid speaking in the jargon that I've become used to, I'll go ahead and describe the phases once again for us. Phase 1 is the roof replacement. Phase 2 would be the additions and alterations, which is the cafeteria expansion, the addition of classrooms as well as the science labs. And then Phase 3 would be the windows replacement and PCB remediation. So since the last time I updated, I believe we have completed the contract award for Phase 1. We've locked in the cost of the roof replacement that is included in the guaranteed maximum price, the GMP. The construction schedule will begin in the summer of 2015 and will also be completed in the summer of 2015. Okay. So by the time of the next school year start, it will be complete. Phase 2, the additions and alterations, we've broken ground there. We've awarded all the contracts in place, and that is also included in the guaranteed maximum price. Construction began the week after Christmas break, during the winter break. And so far, the mobilization of the site perimeter is complete. The stair tower has been demolished, and that part of the project is complete. Some underground utilities are being relocated, and also the excavation for the addition on the Webster wing is also in progress. during some of the project, we encountered some unanticipated asbestos, and that has already been abated, and that part of the project is complete as well. So for phases 1 and 2, the total guaranteed maximum price is $11,617,584. Any questions about phase 1 and phase 2 before I get to phase 3?
What was the amount of your authorization?
$11,630,000.
Wow.
That's pretty good. The roof, if we can just go back, we had the recent issue with the roof, was it the HVAC? Isn't there an issue with the, no?
Well, we relocated, or all the costs of relocating all the HVAC equipment is included in the price.
It is.
Yes, there we went to the Board of Ed in November and got an ed spec and went with a TPO roof, which is, I forget the acronym that it stands for. It's a single ply membrane, which was a significant cost savings. Also with the addition of the solar panels, which are not part of this project, it provides some additional protection to the asset. So I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly. But
Yeah, if I found right, I think what you're referring to is we went out to bid originally on this phase, it came back too high, and one of the explanations for having it come back too high was the HVAC.
That's right.
Right.
On top, is that?
That is, yeah.
In July, yes, we did. We went out to bid late June, early July, and some of the costs were, it was high season, some of it was the relocation. We went out to bid again, I believe, middle to the end of October, and then we settled on the final bid, included in the GMP on the budget.
Okay.
All right. I've got some overall questions on the
Okay.
cost and the differences. Do you want to get
Gotcha.
through, tell us what's going on?
Yeah, I'll
with
go ahead
phase
and go to
three
phase 3.
And come back to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and Kevin, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, no, it's fine.
Okay, so phase 3 is the window project, which is still an issue. We received we submitted to the submitted to the EPA, and they responded at the end of January with some more clarifying questions.
Okay.
So there's some more testing going on, and we're preparing a response for that. The construction documents will also be revised based on the EPA approval of that plan. The Office of School Facilities, we received approval to that, to go out to bid on that, and we're targeting a bid probably in the fall of 2015. We do anticipate seeking more funding for that based on the current project. The project has always been a 2-summer plan, and based on going back and forth with the EPA, we didn't think it prudent to try and push even part of it with the lead time. It's approximately at 20 weeks, I believe, to even order windows. So we anticipate beginning the first part of the window replacement pending funding in 2016, and then the second summer being complete in 2017.
Okay. Okay, and current ballpark on that, is that about $4 million is what our current estimate is?
Going back and forth with, especially with the clarification regarding the last bit with the EPA, we've gone in between, I think on December 31st, it was around 2.3, and now we're thinking upwards of 3.5 to 4 million, based on the plan.
Okay, fine. Take a shot at this.
Please.
Obviously, the big question is we had an original approved budget for all 3 phases at $11,600,000. We're getting 2 phases for that.
Right.
Third phase is going to cost another 3 to 4 in that range. So, from a standpoint of just the big question is,
Right.
how'd that all come about? What were we missing? what's driving that cost increase? Because obviously we plan to do the windows and the PCBs as part of the original project,
Right.
so it's not just the windows. It's, where does the increase come from?
Well, from the beginning, we were concerned about trying to fit the entire project within the budget. Off the top, compared to the original budget, the soft costs, a lot of the soft costs were not included. There was no owner's rep fee. The construction manager and the architect fee were included together. And I believe the budget for both of those, if I recall correctly, was around $400,000, which doesn't even cover the fee of one of them at this point.
What does the combined fee for those two look like?
The current in the GMP, it's around 1.4 million, I believe.
And the owner's rep, what is and how does the owner's rep differ from the construction manager? Can you fill us in on that, and then tell us what the fee for that is?
The owner's rep manages the project from the town point of view, and that fee is about $400,000. The construction manager manages all the construction aspects. They manage the subcontractors, supervise the construction, and make sure that the project is scheduled correctly and stays faithful to the timeline established.
So that's 1.8 million, roughly, in just those two numbers?
No. I included the architect in the 1.8 million. The architect's fee is...
So that's 1.4 million, because the construction manager and architect, you said, were in the budget for 400,000.
Correct.
You said it's now in for 1.4 million. So that's $1 million increase.
Right, just for the construction manager and the architect. That's
Right,
$1
and then the
million
owner's
increase.
rep was in at 0, and that's 400,000, so that's
That's correct.
1.4. Okay, that's part of the increase.
Mhm.
What drives the rest?
Additionally, in order to make sure we got students in the seats in September, the construction schedule had to be condensed, and we had to be aggressive in all aspects of the planning, including extra time spent on the architect's behalf, extra workers and the tradesmen, also making sure that the schedule is maintained in order to get students in. So that drove part of the cost. In the original budget also, the escalation cost was not included. There was a comment at the end of that report, I believe it was 5% escalation per year.
Okay, you've just listed a number of things there.
Mhm.
You said extra time by the architect, but that should be in the 1.4 million, correct?
Well, that's correct, yes.
Okay. So beyond the 1.4 million, when you say more workers,
Well,
what does that mean?
would
Is that
specifically the addition and renovation costs. The difference is around $2 million, just in that, the difference in the estimate alone. And that would be due partially to the escalation and also staying faithful to the schedule in order to get the students in the chairs.
Okay, why did the schedule, what is it about the schedule? Where did the additional cost come from moving the schedule up?
There would be more resources, more workers dedicated to the project for each phase of it. That should be, and pushing the timeline of getting, essentially beginning the school, the actual building out of the construction of the classrooms and the cafeteria while students are not in the building. I think, if I recall correctly, the construction begins in the middle of June. Is that correct? I mean, not the actual...
June, right now, we're at June 16th for the last days.
Right. So getting between June 16 and August 25th, I believe, was the other date mentioned, in order to get the project complete.
What was the original plan? That seems like the summer. Those dates seem to be pretty well predicted, other than a few snow days. that shouldn't have, how much of that 2 million was driven by having to do it during the summer? I mean, that,
Compressed.
I would just, I mean, you know, absent being a construction expert, I would say it's based on the report we're getting of the escalation of the costs and of the tradesmen. I could go line item by the trades.
well, to some degree, and I realize you're not a construction expert, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot to do that, but we are paying 400 grand for an owner's rep and another 1.4 million for an architect and a construction manager. Can they help answer that?
Sal, can you speak, or Tom, can you speak to? Okay, Tom Beebe, the owner's rep from Arcadis.
The cost of construction came in higher than anyone's anticipation, is probably the most accurate and succinct way of explaining why we're over budget. We attempted to identify cost-saving opportunities. In some cases, we rebid, the construction manager rebid several packages in order to achieve cost savings, and also solicited some of those subcontractors' input on how to achieve additional cost savings without compromising the program or the quality of the work. But overall, we experienced an increase in the cost of construction from what was originally budgeted.
Okay. Let me try this. We had an original number of 11.6 million. I'm going to just add 4 million to that, just to keep the math simple. This is currently then 15.6 million. What are the top 10 reasons that is over 11.6 million? I understand the costs are higher. I'm looking for why the costs are higher and what the key drivers are for the costs being higher.
The cost, well, as some of the costs that Mark mentioned, the budget did not include, really didn't contemplate a lot of soft costs that we ended up with in the project. That was one category.
Can I interrupt you? Can you define soft?
Soft costs
for
are
us?
design costs, environmental consulting costs, the owner's representative costs. They're, as opposed to hard costs, which are considered the cost of the work, the construction work. So the original estimate didn't contemplate many of those costs. It didn't have adequate escalations. It didn't have adequate contingencies. And our experience from the EPA requires a much more substantial testing and remediation than we originally anticipated, than I think the budget contemplated. It really wasn't based on any
Okay, that's for the
EPA.
third phase and the windows and the PCB remediation?
Well, some of that is applicable to this phase because there are window replacements in this phase.
Okay.
Those that are being, the new windows that are being replaced.
Here's what I'm trying to get to. A series of line items and task descriptions and construction steps that adds up to 11.6 million for the entire project as the original estimate and bid cover. Then I'm looking for a second column that shows all those same categories, different ones if they weren't included in the first, with a series of numbers that adds up to 14.6 million. And then a third column that shows the differences by line item.
Yes.
Is that
Yeah,
work?
yeah, he's asking
Yeah.
for a bridge analysis is what he's asking for, to bridge from, project 1, 2, 3, 11.6. Now we know project 1, now we know project 2 by line item, but the third one's still kind of unknown, but we know it's 3 or 4 million bucks, right? And that breaks out into 3 or 4 or whatever number of major line items. So, because that bridge analysis will not just show where things went up, because it'll also show where things have gone down. Because there are things that jump off the pages that are now lower, at least on this analysis here, if I'm reading the right column, and I think I am. For instance, FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that's down by 175 grand from the original. So that's actually gone down, meaning there's 175 going the other way, bad on top of the net, right? And your contingencies are down by 290K. So That's mathematically down, so there's something to offset that. And in addition to that offset, there's other things that get you back up to the $4 million delta. That's what he's looking for. A line-by-line bridge analysis from where we were to where we are. I think
Yep.
that's what you're
And-
saying.
And I think as we've learned on other projects, if you've used the contingency up significantly before you've even started the project, that would be worth some evaluation also. Because we've just had a project go through that used up all their contingency almost before the project started. They're about halfway through and they've used up the whole contingency, so. Is there anything like that at the moment?
I think as we track the status of the budget from the original to our design estimates, we did estimates at the end of each design. I think we can assemble that from that information. Or what we have, some of which I think we may have shared with you before, may answer the question without any further embellishment, but I'd like to be sure before we send it to you.
Yeah, well, what we're going to do is ask you to come back.
Yeah, I think so.
Because to be clear, one, we're not necessarily asking for more work, but if it takes more work to put that together, that's okay.
Sure.
But I also want to be clear that this committee reports to the Board of Selectmen. So that puts us in the position of both having to oversee the work, but also to understand it from a taxpayer standpoint, from a resident standpoint, to make sure that we're kind of have an explanation for what's taking place. As we've seen on some projects, I'm going to pick on Riverfield School. There were PCBs inside the walls of the gym, and they were there. We didn't know it. We have to address it. It was over the original budget, but that was also the explanation for it being over, and that's something that's understandable. So what we have to get to is from these numbers, which clearly document the overage, to say, okay, how do we get that to be understandable? What are the things that drove that? We want to know that so we have a degree of confidence in what's going forward from here. But also, from this board standpoint, we look at other projects. So this is something that helps educate us in our review of other projects.
Sure.
So we're looking for this from two levels.
Right. Understand.
Okay, is that, okay? I realize I've dominated the discussion.
No,
here,
I-
but
You have made my point completely.
I agree.
all right. Any further questions right now, or any other clarifications we want coming back?
Just one clarification on that bridge analysis where you're going from A to today, right? You know, a bunch of the line items haven't changed a lot. The differences aren't material. You know, they're up or down a couple points or whatever. But there are some that are up a lot, like I think it's the third line down, the actual renovation cost is going from 3.6 to 5.9. So I think within that, there's going to be a $2.3 million variance, depending on how you break it up in phases, right? But it would be good to see some detail underneath that to support that larger number, is all. It's not just like the fees going from 15 to 20, and that's understandable. There's more sub-components to those larger items, which would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that the term I would use, and it's not certainly a technical term, but we're looking for the drivers. What are the things that are making that cost increase happen? Or in invoking Pareto's law, what are 20% of the items that are driving 80% of the cost increase?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
Now, schedule-wise, this is, oh, I'm sorry.
Is there anything else?
No.
You okay?
You sure? I
Yep,
didn't mean to
I'm
cut you
fine.
off.
Nope.
No.
All right. No, go ahead.
Schedule-wise, I think this meeting here was the one that we would have had on the first Wednesday of the month, right? So if we're on proper cadence, then we're back here next Wednesday.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is a
Is it on the
week
agenda?
an adequate amount of time to do this analysis, or not? Because we're back here next Wednesday, and then we won't meet again until the first Wednesday of March, whenever that happens to be.
If, I would prefer that we have a little more time in order to scrub it thoroughly to make sure we've got the detail, so that you're not looking for additional detail within a week after we present it to you. If you're not comfortable with that, then
think what we want is, and we've had a couple of updates, and I think we keep trying to get to this point, and we didn't have this much information, we didn't have bids out before, there was a lot less that we were sure of in the past. But we've had similar discussions for a while, so on one hand, I'm going to tell you we want this probably as soon as possible, because kind of we've been waiting for this for months. On the other hand, we want the right answer, so I don't want to
Well, you also have to consider that if you need new funding, you have to go through other bodies, and you're looking at the summer, right? So the sooner we get the information, the sooner we can make some decisions and move some of that funding forward. So you want to stay on that timeline as well. So March is kind of close when you look at the other boards that you have to go to.
Well, I think to describe where they are is based on our discussions last fall, and it was obvious this was over dramatically, and they could get all 3 phases done for the $11.6 million we approved.
Right.
I went back to the Board of Ed. They got the ed spec modified. So the ed spec basically said phase 3 here, for lack of a better term, is an ad alternate. If you get to it, great. If you don't get to it, okay. So they're only required now, that spec only covers phases 1 and 2. Since that's chewing up the entire 11.6, my biggest concern on that, because you're so tight, would be how tight you are in contingency. But theoretically, they can do the 2 phases under the current authorization and would have to come back for additional funding for phase 3, which they may choose to do as the same project with additional funding or a separate new project. And some of that will depend on reimbursements from the state, that type of thing. So I don't mean to point them in any direction there. That's kind of an administrative deal, not a construction issue. From our standpoint, right now they're authorized to do phases 1 and 2. They don't have enough money to do 3. And unless in the contingency point that you made would be the one item that would make me question whether you can do phases 1 and 2 for that. So if you could address that when you come back also. Because if you used up that much contingency, you've only got a $13,000 buffer right now between what you're authorized to do and what you're spent, so you really need to nail it, because to Sheila's point, to get through the boards based on the schedule is going to take at least 60 days. And I suspect there'd be kind of a lot of questions because of this, so we're trying to get some of these questions answered ahead of time, so folks understand now what happened. Otherwise, that whole discussion will take place before every board you go to understand this. And again, there'd be 3 boards, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM.
The other follow-up point I would have on the process is, and I'm not sure whether this analysis is something that would be done by yourself or would require the building committee to meet, that I'm not clear on. But now that we have GMPs on phase 1 and phase 2, basically, this information should be available to, it's basically a matter of, putting it into the spreadsheet. I'm not oversimplifying it, but it's not like 2 or 3 months ago when we couldn't have done this. Now I think we have enough information that's known, of course, leaving a placeholder for the phase 3. We understand that. But I think on phases 1 and 2, there's enough data points to do the analysis, sooner than later.
Right, and phase 3, if we know it might be $3 to $4 million, there's some estimates that we have that put in that range.
Yeah, so we can have,
But, and again, what we're looking for is less whether it's 13 million or 14 million in that. It's more about what are the drivers. What's driving, and the first 2 is Kevin mentioned. Because you have the bids back, it ought to be pretty clear to say, here's what the original budget was, and here's what the bid came back at, what are the differences, and which ones are the biggest ones, and why. And then, if we have an estimate in the $3 to $4 million range, we can do that same thing, not as complete as a bid, and we don't quite have all the EPA approvals back, so we don't know what the mitigation plan is, if I understood you correctly. So we're still waiting for final approval on a mitigation plan. And it seems like every project we do these days has a mitigation plan. But, so we need that, but that $3 to $4 million, if that were the correct range, what is it that's driving that to that point? And again, we're looking at compared to the original estimate. So the original estimate didn't have anything cast in concrete either. So we're trying to get to that to see how we got from point A, the original estimate, to point B, where we are now. And to a degree, if you look at those drivers, I'm just going to pick on the mitigation plan. if you come back to this board and say, hey, we've put $500,000 in for that, I'm making that number up, and we're not very confident in that because EPA hasn't given us final approval yet. In fact, we're in some serious negotiations, and if they win, that $500,000 goes up dramatically. So we need some degree of confidence in what those numbers are and what your concerns are. What are the risk factors as you see them in terms of the overall number we discuss, in terms of how tight that is? Does that make sense in terms of,
Yeah.
guys, is that?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And I've got one more follow-up on this analysis. When I look at this analysis today, do any of the costs, and I assume they would be on the soft cost sides, do any of these costs potentially apply toward Phase 3? Fees, et cetera? I mean, is this as it reads?
The environmental testing and design, AMC, if you see under the consultants' fees,
Okay, because,
that is for the original testing and the preparation of the plan submitted to EPA.
right, so that would be a cost that's directly associated with the Phase 3 that we know we, A, haven't done, and B, haven't addressed funding for yet.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
So we should carve those things out of the top
Yes.
sections, right? Because they don't necessarily, that.
The architect's also done the drawings for the windows.
Right,
prepared the
so,
drawings, design
you know,
drawings.
in order for it to be really apples to apples, because if you just look at it now and you assume that everything that's there applies to Phase 1, Phase 2, thank you, then I think there was going to be costs that drift from what we're seeing here into Phase 3 that might not be captured. Is that a fair way to ask it?
I understand where you're going, and I believe you're correct.
So I'm just trying to pare it back so it's apples
So
to
the
apples.
phases are
It's a matter
completely
of how the
separate.
presentation
Yeah.
will be pulled together,
Yeah.
separating out the
Right.
different construction, estimates, conceptual, design development, so on and so forth.
Right.
For each of the three phases, so the presentation on one spreadsheet of where the growth is for any particular line item
Is not
will
a,
be
is not a.
difficult in a presentation
Yeah, thank you.
format, and I understand where you're going with that.
Okay.
And if
Thank
there's
you.
any way to
I
get
do
bigger
too.
numbers, that would be
With
really helpful.
Sal's- with Sal's help.
Just bigger printed numbers,
Bigger
not...
print, not bigger. But I think that what I've struggled with throughout this project as we've talked
Yeah.
is the fact that I think of this as three projects.
I do too, right?
And yet, we have four cost categories: 3 construction projects and overhead, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And allocating that overhead to each of the, because you're right, at the end of Phase 1 and Phase 2, we need something that totals 11.6, so we can see that we're under that. And then we need something that goes on beyond that.
Right, because,
And to the extent that we're spending money on Phase 3 before we are authorized to do that or get there, hurts Phases 1 and 2, and I think, you know, creates a risk factor for the project because it's chewing up your contingency on Phases 1 and 2.
that's correct. And the other component there, I mean, the math will be the same in the end in grand total, but when you look at the pieces, if there are some of these costs that directly do apply to Phase 3, and look, there might be some art and science here, I get it, you know, because people worked on one thing at one time, and now we're trying to make it 3 things, and so that's understandable. But what that could do in the end is, you know, make the the true net cost of Phase 1 and Phase 2 maybe a little bit less than they appear to be here, and Phase 3 a little bit more than it appears to be as a single freestanding item. Does that make sense?
Right.
Possibly, I mean, I'm just guessing at the moment.
Well, right now, you're on a high level, you have bid numbers for Phase 1 and 2.
Right.
You have soft costs
It's
that
the
are
soft
for...
costs that need to get mushed around.
That are for Phase 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you.
You have to carve out that.
Right.
Soft cost Phase 3, put it down as an actual committed cost, because you actually spent some of that, such as for architectural design and
Understood.
environmental testing
Right.
beforehand. It's already committed, some of it's already billed out, so it's a
Right. But that analysis will...
part that's known, and then you got the parts that's estimate with a certain level of confidence.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we really...
And that's where you're trying to go.
Right, and we also, and because of how that's working out, as we get down to 11.6, because I'm going to look at this, if Phase 1 and Phase 2 cost 11.6, you don't have enough money to finish the job right now. because you already started stuff on Phase 3. All right, so what I need, or what we need, I think.
You want to know what's
Yeah.
committed on it.
We got to know how much money we have left. Sooner or later, we can't overspend 11.6. And to the extent you've spent items on Phase 3, that cuts back on the available dollars right now for Phases 1 and 2.
Good, thanks for that, Sal. I appreciate the follow-up.
And some, just as a point, there is some money to get to the Phase 3. Train already left the gate for the EPA approval, so that there are monies that will continue to be spent on securing that approval. Just can't flip the switch off on that. It has to complete, and that's accounted for, but nothing beyond that. That would be information to get to what's the actual real construction estimate to lock you into where you want to know what that, is it 3 million or 4 million, that question.
Right.
And then getting to bid.
Yeah,
Once
actually, those are my questions. The one other one that I'm looking for clarity on, or we are, is the fact that we said that we had 11,617, 11,617,000 currently estimated to complete that project, Phases 1 and 2. We have an approved budget of 11,630,000. To the extent you spent more than $13,000 on Phase 3, you're now over budget and do not have the money you need to complete Phase 1 and 2.
No, some of that money is included up in, above the line for the 11,617.
Yeah.
In the, so for instance, the architect did the drawings for Phase 3. That's already accounted for in that fee.
To the extent that that is, you kind of need to see Phase 1 and 2 can get done for something less than 11,617,000, because 100 grand of that's already spent on
Oh,
Phase
completely
3.
understand what you're saying.
So you don't have that available to spend on Phases 1 and 2. So you're now managing Phases 1 and 2 to a lower number.
Right, and it needs to be presented better. I understand what you're saying, yes.
Yes.
Because unlike most projects, this really is 3 projects kind of rolled into one. By combining the overhead, that's okay if you're doing them all at once, because we don't have the funding authority to do them all. Then we
Needs
get
to be
back
known.
to allocating those costs so we know where we are. But we also have to know how much of the 11.6 we've spent on Phase 3, because it's not available to spend on Phases 1 and 2. And I just don't want to double count.
Understood.
Anything else?
No, that's perfect.
Right. So we're saying March 4th. And I believe that's the first Wednesday in March, but we're saying March 4th. Please confirm that date. It is the first Wednesday in March. I think it's March 4th.
It is
but-
March 4th, yes.
I'll do that right now, Mr. Tetro.
All right. You guys okay with that? Perfect.
Yes,
All right.
March 4th is the first Wednesday.
All right, thank you.
That's
That's the day.
All right, and again, the big picture, where are we? In this case, what have we spent on each of 3, or what are we planning to spend on each of 3 phases? What drove that? So we can understand kind of what changed. It's such a big number, I don't know how else to say it. It's just what changed. That's what we're having trouble getting our heads around.
Yeah, I mean, as I said it and got more clarity, the question you're asking, the 2 main drivers would be the absence of the soft costs and escalation. Just loose ballpark in my brain, that's around 2 million right there.
Right, and what we need to do is see that
Yeah,
in writing
no, I
before
get
us,
it.
because it did.
Yeah, my brain's hard enough to read with that.
Oh, good, thank you.
It's a short book.
All right, and thank you for hanging with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it. Okay.
Moving on.
Steady progress.
Yes,
Can someone postpone it to a date certain?
we're not. It's a report.
Oh, excuse me. I
There's no motion.
I'm sorry.
Nope, thanks. To consider and act upon tax refunds as recommended by the tax collector and the amount recommended. May I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second.
Second,
All right, do we have any discussion or amendments?
I'd like to make an amendment.
Okay.
I make an amendment to delete the period at the end of the sentence and add a comma followed by 9,178 and 39 cents.
39 cents. Wow. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on the amendment, and the amendment only? Any comments from the public on the amendment only? Back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Mm-hmm.
On the amendment, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the item as amended is before us. Any comments? Any further comments from the public? Back to the board. Are we ready to vote on the item as amended? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next up, hear and consider and act upon any communications. There's none that I know of. To hear, consider, and act upon any other business that shall properly come before this meeting. There is none that I'm aware of. Motion to adjourn? All right.
Motion.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. All right, Jim.
Sound off?
So what does next Wednesday look like? Are we crazy packed?